Good morning and welcome everybody to day 2 of Greenbiz 23 here in Scottsdale, Arizona. I am one of your co-hosts, John Schmea. I am the VP and Senior Analyst for Circularity here at Greenbiz.
And I'm Leah Garden, your other co-host, and I'm the Climate Tech reporter at Greenbiz. And my newsletter, Climate Tech Rundown, was out this morning. You should definitely subscribe and read it. I have to say it's incredible.
Yeah, if you haven't subscribed yet, it's pretty enjoyable. Not as good as Circularity Weekly, but it's coming.
Anyway, so just a quick recap. Woo, guys, I swear I've had my coffee. Greenbiz 23 is the premier sustainability professional event. We are so excited. The room is just as packed today as it was yesterday. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Are you ready for it?
Super excited. Let's talk about what we're excited about today.
Ooh, okay.
First for me is this discussion we're going to have about corporate collective action in the age of urgency, which is a mouthful of a title, but it's going to feature Starbucks, Nike, and Microsoft on our keynote stage. Yeah. Leah, what about you? What are you excited about?
Well, I did plug my newsletter for a reason, because I have a startup section within the newsletter where I highlight a startup every week. So I'm really excited for Shantae Harris from Schmidt Future. She's going to be talking about a brave new world for sustainability startups.
That's awesome.
I track well. I'm really easy to follow.
Very exciting.
Yeah. So, this is your first Greenbiz 23 in person, just like me. How has it been for you so far?
You know, it's been great. I have had a lot of really excellent hallway conversations.
Yeah.
There are a ton of smart, passionate people here, and pretty much everywhere you turn, you see a familiar face, and that's been a lot of fun for me. How about you?
I have, like I said, I've never been to this before, and I just can't get over the vibe. And I know that sounds a little flippant and casual, but the vibe of every single person in the room coming from a corporate background, but like wanting to do good and wanting to genuinely connect with people that they wouldn't otherwise have access to say, well, what are you doing with your strategy, or how are you taking on your ESG or Scope 3? And they're so genuinely interested in wanting to learn from others to make their own strategies better.
Yeah, that's been great. I hosted a breakfast this morning for people interested in circular economy, and somebody said, they're like, I just love this because I actively learn from everybody else in all the other industries that I don't get to talk to every day, right? Most people sort of have a good pulse of what's going on in their own industry from sustainability, but hearing from other sectors and people in different roles in different parts of the economy can be, really inspiring and also just really thought-provoking. You can learn a lot from it, so that's been exciting. Speaking of circularity and circular economy, I did want to plug for everybody at home, we are hosting Circularity 23 in Seattle this year, June 5th through the 7th. It is going to be, what do the kids say? Fire?
Fire.
The youngs. I think they say fire. It's going to be lit. We're going to have 1,200 people, not 12,000. 12,000 would be amazing, but we're going to have about 1,200 people there. We're going to talk about plastics and packaging, apparel, textiles, technology, the built environment, and we're going to talk about how all of those players can be part of this circular economy transition that we're hoping for. So I'm really excited about that.
I know.
Just had to plug it.
I mean, I get it.
And Seattle's fun, so join us if you can. Registration is now open at greenbiz.com.
Everybody go. Hopefully the rain that was here in Arizona this week during our conference won't follow us to Seattle, even though that seems more likely.
It does seem more likely. We're also going to be indoors most of the time, so,
Okay.
we don't have a lot of outdoor events planned, unfortunately, because Seattle in June can be beautiful.
Can be.
It can be.
It can be. There are rumors that it has been in the past.
Yes. So let's see. Our keynotes are going to start here in about 45 seconds.
Yes.
Very excited for today. If you have any questions, you can tweet them to us,
yes,
I guess,
please.
at Greenbiz. You can use the hashtag Greenbiz23.
Yes.
You can also just post about what you're learning. That's exciting. We love to hear what people are excited about on our keynote stage. And stick with us afterwards. We are going to do some more content from past events, our curated, exciting content. And then we're going to have 4 great interviews, including one from our own Brian Lewis.
Yes, who, if you were watching yesterday, he was on the stage. He was telling everyone about the emerging leaders.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited to talk to him. He's incredible.
So stick with us, have fun, and we'll talk to you later.
Bye, everybody.
welcome Greenbiz CEO Eric Farrow to the stage.
Good morning, Greenbiz.
Good morning.
Who knows the name of that track? Yell it out, come on. Very good, Colin. So Come and Get Your Love is the theme for today. I'm going to pick up where Dylan left off yesterday. I want to see a show of hands of who is a first-time person at Greenbiz. Hands up, please. I'm going to do one better. I'm going to have you all stand up for 1 second. Everybody stand up who just had their hand up. So those of you who don't, you're alumni, just look around, see who you get a mental image, and at the break, I want you to introduce yourself to them and talk about why you're here. So, thank you. You can all sit down now. So in case you're wondering what we do besides throw a great party, Greenbiz empowers professional communities to confront the climate crisis. And how we do that is through servant leadership. And I learned about servant leadership through John Davies, who runs our Greenbiz Executive Network. And it's really a profound, simple concept that takes a while to really internalize. But I'm going to shift away to talk about one of the interesting things is intimacy at scale. How do this conference is getting so much bigger. How do we think about making connections at scale? And that's one of the things we're really focusing on and learning about, and we're interested in your feedback if you have ideas about that. But one of the ways with the peer networks I mentioned is we're launching a whole bunch of new peer networks, more vertical peer networks, like around circular economy, around transportation. And we do that across 4 markets. We think about these. This is the corporate sustainability market. This is what we grew out of. You think about these as a Venn diagram, essentially. They're all intersecting, but they all have unique communities and ecosystems that we're really trying to accelerate as quickly as we can with intimacy to confront the climate crisis. So with that, that's my little spiel for the day. I'm incredibly excited to bring my colleague out, Dylan Siegler, and before she comes out, I just want to say, you are not going to believe this outfit. Come on out here, Dylan.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Everyone stay warm and dry last night? That was not a question I was hoping to have to ask from the stage in Arizona in February, but here we are. It looks like if it holds, we'll have sunshine today, if not warmer temperatures. So great to see you all this morning. What did you think about the keynotes yesterday? Can I get a round of applause if you like them? Okay. Listening to them myself and then getting a chance to talk to some of you at the reception yesterday evening, I heard a theme. And the theme was that while this community is dealing with some hard truths, we come back to hope again and again as our ethos. And as we heard Joel McCower tell us yesterday in his keynote, having a vision for the future and knowing how you and your company are going to show up in that future is vital. Actualizing that vision is what we're here to do today. With that in mind, we have something a little bit different for you today in the breakouts. So you'll have 32 different breakouts to choose from this afternoon. And one of them you'll see is a 2-hour block titled Bring Your Own Challenge, a hands-on workshop for breakthrough solutions. And so the idea here is that you're in charge of the programming. No one knows your challenges better than you do. And so this is a chance to workshop those challenges with your peers and to harness the genius of the Greenbiz community. So the types of topics that can be proposed might be a challenge that you're facing in your industry or an opportunity that you see to transform your organization. Anyone can propose a topic. And so the way you do that is that there's a sign-up grid near the registration area. And so you can sign up to host a discussion, you can sign up to participate in a discussion, and you need to do that by 12:30 today. If you do want to participate, that session starts at 12:45. If you've already signed up to host a table, please stop back by that registration area to pick up a handout. I want to go ahead and thank our sponsors. We are so appreciative of these companies that come to us every year, and the new ones who have come to us just for the first time this year. This is really integral to making this event a success. And I also want to appreciate our partners, our convening partners, our community partners, our sustainability partners, and our media partner, such important, vital parts of our community. So let's get this party started. I'm dressed for it. We're gonna bring up a really amazing set of keynotes today. We're going to dig into the data. We're going to learn how to combat burnout. We're gonna learn how to combat bias. We're gonna learn how to better lead change. And we're going to look at the future of collective action. We're also going to meet the future of innovation. So to set up our first keynote a little bit, it's a boom time right now for software as a service companies serving the climate community. And despite this action in the marketplace, we're still hearing from our practitioner community that we're all spending too many resources and too much time tracking the net zero transition, and too little time and too few resources making the net zero transition. So what's going on here? We asked the CEO of a climate disclosure and carbon management software company to break into the data for us, break it down. And so I'd like to welcome to the stage to do that, CEO of Persephone, Kentaro Kawamori.
Good morning, everyone. When the Greenbiz team first asked me to come speak to you all, I was told I might have to follow John Kerry. So one, I'm super happy that that didn't have to happen. Two, I think Dylan just beat John Kerry with that suit. Fantastic. She told me she got it from Rent the Runway, so secondhand clothing and rental, perfect. Really a great pleasure to be here with you all. Thanks for taking a little bit of time to listen to what the hell I have to say. Yes, I cuss like a sailor, so just prepare yourselves. We will dive right in. So, my gig is I'm co-founder and CEO of Persephone, and I'll tell you a little bit about that after we talk about this data thing. And first of all, I just want to make sure to acknowledge that it's just fantastic to be here with you guys. I actually live locally. One, it's awesome to be able to come up and see you all here in my hometown. Two, how cool is this? I was at a dinner last night, and I have been to so many conferences in my life. I have spent and lost more money in Vegas during conferences than I can ever count. Doing it here with you all and this community is fantastic. It's my first Greenbiz, so I was raising my hand. Prepare yourselves for a ton of memes and GIFs, depending on what you like to call those. I also really like this one because I feel like Steve Buscemi as a tech founder. I'm not wearing a hoodie today, but sometimes when you do this gig, it's like being President Obama and the before and after pictures. You wear the hoodie and you look a little techie, and then you feel like you're a very old man on the inside, because it's a hard thing to do. So today I'm here to talk to you about data. The climate crisis is a data problem. Raise your hand if you have heard that or some variation of that before. We pretty much all have at this point. I guess side note, is it data or data? I'm just going to use both, and then you guys can think I have no concept of grammar. It'll be great. So, what does this mean? I told you memes are coming. There's many, many more coming. Well, that's what we're here to talk about. That speaks for itself. So, I am mired in data all day long, every day, and it's where I've spent most of my career in enterprise software. Again, the Greenbiz team, even though I hate talking about myself genuinely, they told me, you got to talk about yourself a little bit. I'm going to do that after. We'll talk about the data stuff first. So the key thing to note here is when we say this sort of generic statement, the climate crisis is a data problem, it means a whole bunch of different things. And so that's sort of the first thing I want to establish, right? This has become a little bit of a tropey thing that we talk about as a community. And what I want to talk a little bit about what that means, and specifically what that means in the corporate context. And my stance on this is the climate crisis is not a data problem. There's a bunch of different data problems within it, but we first should anchor ourselves around the simple fact that the climate crisis is not a data problem. It is an emissions problem. There's a bunch of different data problems that we have to tackle in order to solve this thing at scale. But I'm not going to be the guy that sits up here and tells you, hey, it's a data problem. Here's a bunch of cool, smart stuff about data. I'm just going to try to keep this as simple as possible. Because that is, at the end of the day, what we're talking about. It's an emissions problem first and foremost. Data is just an asset and a tool that helps us understand and ultimately solve these challenges. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Unfortunately, it's become a little bit of a talking point to sell you stuff. By the way, we're having a 50% sale on Persephone software, so come see us on the booth outside. But in all seriousness, I wager when you've heard this phrase before, it's been from some vendor who you have in your portfolio or you might have in your portfolio. And it's become this sort of thing that is this, hey, data is this like mysterious, ambiguous thing. Having data skills is a hard thing. What does that actually mean? And is somebody just trying to sell me something? That's pretty much what happens half the time. The other half of the time, it's just become this sort of tropey thing that we say, right? For better or for worse. We're pretty active on social, and we like to kind of talk about certain things that become trendy. And by the way, I am the least trendy person on the planet. I don't have any social media, but I see this on LinkedIn all the time. And this sort of catchphrase has become this sort of meaningless thing in the meanwhile. If I've offended you, sorry, I guess that's just what I do. But we really need to anchor around what does this mean? How do we start talking about data more intelligently? And more importantly, how do we start using it more intelligently over time? So we'll talk a little bit about that. What does this actually mean? And the simple answer from my perspective is it means a whole lot of things. There's just a few examples on here. But the data problems within the climate challenge are so myriad that they can manifest themselves literally in hundreds or thousands of different permutations. And so what we need to start thinking about is really working backwards from the objective, right? And the objective for all of us is to reduce emissions. What are the many things that we have to do to get there? And we need to start thinking about data as these assets and these tools that serve the progress of each of those in the interim. So, very simply, my challenge to you all is let's look at this as a corporate use case. We're not going to look at this, from a governmental emissions data perspective or financed emissions perspective. We're going to look at this at the corporate use case because that's where most of the emissions, of course, are happening in this room. And very simply, I'd encourage you to think about the enterprise climate data problems and challenges as simply the enterprise data challenges. So I'll tell you a little bit more about my background in the past. But because remember, one of the buzzier things of the last decade or so was this concept of digital transformation. And you sprinkled in a little big data, and you sprinkle a little bit of AI these days. It's just all the same data sets that sit within our companies that are either underutilized, wrongly utilized, unable to be utilized. We'll talk a little bit about that. But the enterprise data challenge is so well documented for so long now, there are so many people within a company that already work this problem. But we look at climate data, we look at emissions data as this wholesale different thing, and we talk about it as if it's not the exact same data sets that come from our supply chain systems, our accounting systems, our operational systems. So we need to start looking at the climate data problem as simply the enterprise data problem. You can see these are all, I guarantee you, if you're a practitioner, you have these problems, you deal with these problems. Don't try to tackle them alone. Talk to and find the people within the company that are already working these. They generally sit in IT, but they sit in other departments as well. So what do you do with this? These are 10 simple steps. I won't walk you through all of these since we're limited on time, and you guys will have this as a leave behind. But some really key ones to highlight here is number one, work backwards from what you're trying to accomplish. And if you're trying to accomplish everything, which is trying to get to net zero, and you go, I need to get our data estate in order to achieve net zero, you will never get there. You need to take bite-sized steps to get there. Focus on your systems of record. I have an obvious bias here because the product our company has built is a system of record. But the reality is, systems of record are the most critical data sources and the best way for you to solve data challenges within the company. Think about your ERP system for your financial reporting. You have a source of financial data that you can trust, that's clean, and that's maintained. Same thing that we need to do here. A whole bunch of other tips and tricks here. And what I found as a consultant in the past, I'll tell you about that, as a CIO of a very large public company, these things hold true every single time. And we've all heard that adage of when you look at a complex problem, if you solve it sort of piece by piece, and you look at solving the individual simple pieces, then this specter of this crazy complex data thing becomes much more achievable and much less scary. A couple of things I want to highlight, because these things come up constantly within my customer base or prospective customer base, many of you are here today, is really the point solution fatigue, the software data fatigue, this concept of, hey, we're gonna get to this point where we have this all-in-one ESG solution. I'm just going to tell you right now, it's going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better. All of you are going to spend more money on sustainability software. What does that mean? It means people like me are going to build companies, they're going to build solutions. It means people at big tech companies are going to build solutions. There is going to be more and more complexity before the market consolidates and you see fewer players with higher quality products. It's just the stage of the market we're in. I also encourage you not to be overly enamored with this concept of an all-in-one solution. Kind of back to what I was talking about earlier. There is no all-in-one climate data or software solution. There's so many challenges that we have to solve. You will see many point solutions pop up. Ultimately, those will come back together. So that's my simple takeaway for you all, is don't look at the climate data problem as this unique snowflake problem, because guess what? The data looks the same almost everywhere you go. Look at it as the corporate data problem, and really reach out to the various people within your company that are already working this across different angles. This is my favorite one. You've probably heard the story of the three men and the elephant. And this sums up perfectly, I think, what we deal with every day. We look at emissions data, we look at supply chain data, we talk about engaging suppliers, we talk about setting net zero targets. We're all looking at the same thing, which is just the enterprise data estate. We just need to zoom out and look at that a little bit differently. So, I'm going to go through this very quickly. So who the hell am I to tell you about all this? Well, I've spent most of my career in enterprise software and complex data systems, and really the early part of my enterprise software career. This is not the sum total of my career. It's just when I started focusing on the software space. I was working with some of the biggest infrastructure and data companies in the world, many of which are partners of mine still today. In the second part of that, I got very deep into the emissions problem, and I went to work in the oil and gas industry, which was a really interesting moral quandary for me for a bit. But man, I learned a whole lot about carbon accounting and high emissions. And after that, very quickly pivoted into energy tech investments and have made a number of early stage and later stage energy investments with the Rice Investment Group. We've done everything from renewable natural gas deals to carbon accounting software, obviously, to many, many other things related to sustainability. So over the last 4 years or so, I've been full-time on the entrepreneurial track. I sold my first company that I started, Umbridge to Bain & Company recently. Persephone is where I spend 99.9% of my time, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we do. I'm also a long-time ESG and just sustainability nut. I grew up in Germany, so sustainability is very much woven into the core of how I was raised and into our culture in Germany. So these are some just examples of other sustainability-related stuff that I do. So Wild Tonic, quick plug, is a fantastic kombucha company that's local to Arizona. You should check it out if you haven't had the chance. All organic, sustainable methodologies, women-owned business. MCJ, I think many of you guys are probably podcast listeners. I'm an investor in some of their funds. And then the last one is a company called Mina Families. I've invested into women-owned birthing services marketplace was that one. So I do a whole lot of that on the side beyond sort of our core climate sustainability track as well. Last couple of minutes here. So what do we do at Persephone if you're not familiar with us? We're a SaaS company, as Dylan mentioned. We have built really our first product was a carbon accounting product that some of you may know us for. But we have built and are building various other carbon and climate solutions. And so really we want Persephone to be sort of one of the marquee climate software companies. Carbon accounting is just a part of that. We've built tools like our Net Zero Navigator, which helps people model MAC curves and track and model decarbonization initiatives. We're coming out with some LCA functionality. We've got reporting tools that are going to be, of course, near and dear. And one of the things we're coming quickly more and more known for is our SEC expertise. And so we've got, some of you might have heard Christina Wyatt, who was formerly at the SEC, talk yesterday, who's on our team, Emily Pierce, who was also at the SEC. So this year for us is very, very focused on making sure that you have the most SEC-compliant solution for your carbon footprinting and your disclosures that you can take to your CFO and to your investor relations team and make sure that you're in compliance from that side. With that, we are at the end. I encourage you to come find us and ask any questions of where we can be helpful. You can find us outside, so that is today finally palpable without rain. If you go through the doors there on the outside patio, you'll see our booth there. I'll be hanging out there for a little bit. And with that, thanks for listening. Great to see you all.
Yesterday, I promised you that we would bring you keynotes who aren't bound by the assumptions that got us into this mess, or bound by the assumptions we've all been using to get us out of them. And our next speaker is a thinker who really embodies those ideals. Once you've heard her quietly radical ideas, you're going to find them hard to forget and even harder to refute. Please welcome to the stage the founder of Climate Critical Earth, Tamara Tolzo-Laughlin.
Thank you. So, hi everyone. It's nice to see a few of you gathered. It's a little cold outside, so I felt like the odds of being alone were getting small. My name is Tamara Tolzo-Laughlin. That's the most complicated thing that you will learn about me in the next few minutes together. If you could say it well, I'll meet you outside for a drink. I am a part of a collective of folks who call ourselves Climate Critical Earth. I'm the rabble-rouser who started us, so I get to be the founder. There are other things that I do, so I'm actually way louder than you might imagine, even without these. I have been working at the intersection of environment, nay, climate, energy, and how people handle all of that for about 26 years. I can carbon date my decision to move into this space by my relationship to when the McRib was born, which is like a whole other thing, right? Because it came, it went, it died, it retired. It's like Tom Brady, it's back again. Who knows what's happening with it? But here we are. So if you want to hear me talk about any of those things, you could likely find me in these places. So here are some other places where I'm probably also making your life harder or easier, depending on your angle towards it. I spend a lot of time hanging out with people like Denise Fairchild, if I get the opportunity, trying to make sure that all the green words don't get in the way of the other words, and vice versa. So our missions are aligned, and the mission of my life is entwined with a lot of these organizations, because what else are we doing here? The other place you'll find me is I'm the CEO and president of the Environmental Grantmakers Association. That's a title that I've worn for just about 2 years, and I don't carry it lightly. The idea is that there's no chance we can make the change we need to make if we're not doing it in a multi-hyphenate stance, because that's just how the work actually happens. So in the 26 years since the McRib first made its debut, I have really been thinking a lot about the internal stuff, not just the stuff that's happening on the external parts of climate that make everybody feel nervous and uncomfortable, but the things that are dragging us down that we created. So I named them. It's not just the climate crisis. It's not just how we pay for it, especially since as enviros, we pretended we don't have to pay for things for like 10, 15, 20, 40, 50 years. Climate grief and the idea that we are all currently going through so much transition that grief isn't quite big enough to cover it. And then celebrity, which is the idea that we anoint specific people to represent entire continents of folks having feelings about things changing. So what I want to talk about today is that the things that we are doing now are difficult, But what makes them harder is that our tendency towards doing what makes us feel comfortable is coming at a time when we just don't have time to rehash these old fights, to have them with the same folks, or to disagree with people we largely agree with in principle. So the 4 places where I'm really seeing this is that we're all experiencing waves of authoritarianism. Like the idea that eco-fascism is a thing is because we didn't deal with fascism, right? So here we are. Norms of regression in how we deal with conflict, how we show up for it, and what happens when we show up in global governance spaces to try to handle it. Let's say COP25, 26, 27, and what's coming with COP28. The idea that while all of that stuff is happening on the big stage, we are having personal, interpersonal, institutional, and systemic crashes that are actually undermining our ability to win. We might be our worst ally, based on 26 years of staring at this work all day, every day, no matter what we call it or what we're eating. And to make it worse, the planet doesn't give a crap about what we're doing. It is not fazed by our inability to work together, and the processes that we're unleashing are going to continue. So if you came into this room looking for the cheery talk, this is not it. So just want to make sure you're in the right room. I want to lift up that Climate Critical is really focused on the idea that people are our most precious resource. That of all the things we want to do something about, what we could actually do something about today is the quality of our relationships, what that does to build our coalitions, and how people use their relational capital to do things that are frankly superhuman. So Climate Critical Earth is a group of folks, largely Black women, who have been invisible and essential in holding up different parts of this movement forever, frankly. I would say America's a widget machine that makes this sort of thing where we ask people to be deeply valuable to how we work, but also quiet. So flagging that a group of us got together to say, we don't have time to redo this again, we need to get it done right the first time, we decided we would step up. This is what we do in a pretty interesting way of viewing it. So we think about what it means to help people remember to stop being so busy they forgot to be people. We spent a lot of time in care and repair practice, literally asking people whose brains are full of campaigns and marketing and numbers and metrics to just take a break, for God's sake. Or, whoever's sake, fill in the blank. Here are a few of the folks that do it with us, along with many others who have signed up to say, burnout is real and I'm experiencing it. And in what we've been doing together is thinking about how do we get the word out that burnout is not a personal problem, it's a systemic failure. So we spent a lot of time talking to all the folks we know across the work and did a survey, an international and national survey on burnout. Just this question. We asked people, are you feeling it? Is it real? How can we help you? And whose help would you accept? Among a couple of other questions, and got some interesting things. The information's still coming in, so I'm going to give you 5 high-level takeaways that you can think about as you go back to your places of employment to hopefully make them places that aren't in the crosshairs of this conversation. So the first thing we thought about is that we should probably admit that burnout is everywhere and it's pervasive. Everybody, nearly every single person we talked to in 104 different constellations inside climate and environment as a movement, all came in very, very, very burnt out, very, very burnt out, or very burnt out. At this point, you might call a report toast when it comes out, just to make it easier for people, yes, you read it, everyone's burnt out. So what makes that really interesting is that all 4 groups of people who are currently in the workplace fall into this category. That's even scarier because the folks that we rely on to do this work are such a massive group. We are in the middle of the everyone. I will talk a little bit more about who that is, but these folks are also depleted, disillusioned, distancing themselves from the work, and these are the people we rely on, not just today, but to design tomorrow. This is really important because we're about to lose a lot of people in the workplace, a lot of really great people with experience who actually have other things they could do. So flagging that this is happening, the great retirement is upon us. 75 million boomers are going to retire by 2030. That's happening at the same time as quiet quitting, quiet firing, the looming recession, people who are still stuck in what happened to them in the last recession. We don't really have the kind of human capital it would take to win if we don't get better at this really quickly. The third thing, not everybody's experiencing it the same way. If you notice, I'm wearing this mask because I'm a part of a community of people who is multiple kinds of vulnerable. So I cannot afford to take my fancy behind back to them with an illness if I don't have to. So flagging that not everyone is experiencing the crisis we're all in the same way, it means Black, Indigenous, people of color, folks with marginalized communities, people whose bodies are failing them because of COVID, let's just be honest, are also experiencing systemic blind spots, which means the work they do isn't being seen at a time when we need everybody's innovation. So as we're getting close to the end, I want to flag that sad, fun, interesting fact that made me feel a lot of weird things when I saw it. Even though everyone's burnt out, no one wants to leave this work. 63% of the people we surveyed said that they love people and planet so much that they're going to do it anyway, which is actually hugely problematic for those of us who actually want to win, because the burnout cycle means people are not at their best, they're not in right relationship, they can't possibly understand their hypervigilance and what that does to other people. So as much as it's really supportive that people see the problem, we need people to really take better care of themselves in order to help us. Like this photo proves, it's not them who's experiencing burnout, it's us. That's a big group of people. The people who build our campaigns, who develop our messaging, who build the policy that sets the tone for the market you do your business in, all those people are beyond tired. And as we get super close, I want to flag that there are not enough of us focused on this. We don't have a lot of language for it. We don't know how to keep people from feeling personally implicated by admitting they need the time it takes for them to be creative. Hell, we won't even let people be bored, which is kind of like the mother of invention, right? Like really, let's be honest about it. So flagging that people don't have supportive structures in their workplace to deal with this means it's in fact everybody's problem. Here are 4 things we're doing to try to help people practice rest, remember themselves, stay in community, and not burn up all their bridges. We call it 4 things: rehabilitation, acceleration, incubation, and facilitation. We try to make it so that the people who show up in this space have something to give and feel like they're a part of a choir so that they can tap out when it's time and come back when they're ready. Problems that we're facing: the lack of language, the amount of shame people have about it, is resourcing this kind of support. Because when you ask someone, will you pay to make sure your best employee doesn't die of a heart attack at their desk? They're like, well, sure, if you put it like that, but otherwise, no, not really. So the last thing I'll leave you with is that disability crisis. This moment of disposability has led us to this moment in the climate crisis. And the only thing we're going to do about it is stop throwing people away. So happy to talk about that here, there, or anywhere that you can find me. Thank you so much for your time.
Please welcome to the stage Vice President and Editorial Director at Greenbiz Group, Heather Clancy.
It's time to be the power, time to be the change. I'ma light the torch, I'ma carry the flame. And we can be the spark of a trail blazing. Yeah, let's go. It starts right here, it starts right now. It starts with me from the inside out. 'Cause we can be the spark of a trail blazing. We can be the spark of a trail blazing. Yeah, a trail blazing.
Hi there. It is so wonderful to see you all, and I'm so excited for this conversation because it really blends the 2 themes that we were just hearing about: data, how do you use scientific rigor, how do you use it across your organization to address issues that your organization is trying to grapple with. In this case, we're going to talk about how it really applies to cultural change. The program that you just saw introduced in that little sizzle video is called Content for Change. It is part of Paramount's program to really systemically look at its programming and its production values and marry them with its ESG mission. It's a great program, and it applies across, it started with BET, but now applies across the entire company. So brands like MTV, CBS Interactive, CBS, Showtime, Nickelodeon, and more. I am so thrilled to have their leader of ESG and corporate responsibility, Crystal Barnes. Crystal, so great to have you here. Thank you.
Nice to be here, and hopefully that little sizzle hyped you all up, gave you some energy.
Yeah, yeah. It's an important program. I'm very acutely aware of it for reasons of my own, which I will tell you about later, not on stage.
Over cocktails.
Over cocktails, yes. But how does this really marry, and how is it part of your ESG mission? I'm like, where did it come from as far as, like, why was this an important thing for you to do as a company?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the S for us, and we often say we get busy in the S because we are a media and entertainment company. And so, as you mentioned, Content for Change started by BET post the murder of George Floyd to really honestly hold a mirror up to ourselves and understand the role that media and entertainment plays in stereotypes and biases that exist within content and narratives that we produce. And so that mission was something that incubated in BET, but then we very quickly realized that it was something that we needed to take across our entire portfolio, right? You listed a lot of the brands that are under the Paramount umbrella, which I hope you all love, but we have from kids to great-grandparents in our audiences. And so we have a unique opportunity to bring the mission of Content for Change, looking at the content that we create as a company, looking at our creative supply chain, so everyone that's in the middle of that, from concept to content and all the people in between, to the culture that we breed, both internally and externally. And when you take a holistic view of that, that is a big part of the S for us as a company, because we have a responsibility, as you all imagine, to authentically reflect the audiences that we serve. So we needed to take a step back. We have a long legacy and history of talking about topics and issues that are uncomfortable in many spaces, but we bring them to light within our organization, but we needed to take it a step further. And so that's the mission of Content for Change, to look at that entire end-to-end creation of content.
So when you were trying to scale this, right, I mean, what research was going to inform this? Where is that research coming from, right? So it's not just saying, let's do this, let's represent this way. You're actually really looking closely at all the data. And you came from, I mentioned, she used to be at Nielsen, so that's important.
Media research geek. So it's insights and data are the baseline and framework for every single thing that we do, to your point. And so for us, it was, again, holding that mirror up. What does representation currently look like within our own content? And so we have a research project going right now with USC Annenberg to look at a 62 series across all of Paramount to figure out, where do we stand, right? Part of understanding where you want to go is realizing where you are right now. And so that research study helped us to do that. It's also one thing to have more black and brown faces in your media and entertainment and your content, but then what do the portrayals look like, right? So there's representation and then there's portrayals. And then when you marry the two of those, you're able to then make data and insights informed decisions around your content. And that's the piece that I mean about taking it a step further. It's what instinct is one thing, and we've done quite well in making decisions on instinct, but it's now time to make decisions based on insight.
So can you give us a couple of examples?
Yeah, so one of my favorites, MTV Entertainment Group, has a project called Mental Health is Health. And they started with the research and the insights, to your point. And so they found that 92% of adults would like to see mental health represented in content. 92%. However, only 7% of main characters dealt with a mental health condition within their content. 7%. And so there's a disconnect there. And so Content for Change then gave us the inspiration to look at storylines and topics and issues that either weren't represented as often as they should be or as authentically as they should be, and make some decisions. So they went on a mission. One of their kind of targets and goals is to double the amount of storylines connected to mental health. And they're on that journey right now. And the piece of it, again, the media research in me, is the measurement and the evaluation of it all. And so it's one thing to do this work, it's one thing to do the research and insights, it's one thing to change your content, but to infuse it into your measurement and evaluation is really where
how does that create value?
Yeah, so for us, it creates value in that we not only speak about it, but we are about it, right? Like, we do it. And so creating value is taking that process and infusing it into our business model. ESG and sustainability, as we all know, as sustainability practitioners, can't be an add-on. It has to be embedded into your business strategy. And so being able to measure and evaluate your progress over time, for us, has been key in figuring out how we advance our resources within ESG, how we put human capital against ESG, and how we are consistent in bringing ESG into our business.
So how you're measured against it, that applies to your culture, your corporate culture. So how did you move let's take two different sets of people, your employees, towards this? Like, what was the training like? What was the resistance? Was there resistance? Was there embrace?
So I would say that a large majority of our employees at Paramount are thrilled, because this is not something that started at the center and now is spreading its way to the, the core, the ends of our organization. Mm-hmm. It's something that everyone within Paramount can plug into, because again, I said it's end to end, so it's from concept to content, and all of the people that are a part of that process in between. So it has provided a sense of pride for us all, because it's a personal journey for me, but then also a personal journey for a lot of our employees, and they feel as though what they do every single day plugs into that mission. Mm-hmm. And this is an all boats rise exercise, and so they feel vested in that journey.
So it's an all boats rise. So how is it applied to your production partners and the people that help you produce that content? How are you extending it out? And again, what has the reaction been?
Yep, so it's a great point and great question. We do a lot of work internally through our Office of Global Inclusion to do all the things, trainings, and we have councils, and a diversity council and Steerco, but extending that to our supply chain and our partners was important. And so the culture aspect of Content for Change is what really looks into that, right? It's an extension of doing what we do internally for our own employees, but extending it to our talent and to everyone else that's in the kind of content creation life cycle.
Can you give me an example again?
Yeah, so we have a culture orientation that was, again, started by MTVE, and it's something that is extended to our talent. So they go through this entire process of understanding what our diversity, equity, and inclusion goals are, understanding the role that they play as an extension of our brand as being a part of the Paramount family. And it's something that we have started, again, this pilot to scale model. We started within MTV, but then took it across our entire organization. And so up next actually is our Nickelodeon group, and they are embracing the culture orientation because, again, kids and family is a totally different audience, but it's an opportunity to have multi-generational conversations, which is really exciting for us as a media company.
And you've also extended this out to some internship programs, if I remember correctly.
Yes, our Content for Change, great memory, our Content for Change Academy. And so that's the piece of it that's connected to the supply chain of it all, right? It's about the pipelining. And so we found that there was a really great opportunity within our pipeline kind of program portfolio to look at specifically for individuals who did not go to a four-year college or university, because as you can imagine, in producing content, we have all sorts of jobs that you can apply for. And so we started that, I guess, almost 2 years ago now. We had 7 to 10 candidates that have gone through it and are now expanding it to Canada and LA, because it gives them all the things, the mentorship, job placement, career coaching, all the things that then helps to break the barriers that a lot of folks have faced entering into our industry. So looking at the pipeline is a huge piece of Content for Change as well.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to mention, there was a Super Bowl ad on Sunday that made my husband cry because he felt included. So I want to ask you, what does inclusion mean for you? Is it, you mentioned, obviously, and I think you said when we were talking that you way overcorrected, you overcorrected in certain areas and then realized you had to address this mental health issue as well. So how do you define inclusion?
First of all, this is a journey. We don't have it right, and we continue to get to a point where hopefully things like Content for Change will allow us to get to where we want to be as a company. We've done a lot of great things, correct, but there's a lot of road to go. And so for inclusion for us is ensuring that folks can see themselves in the content that's reflected across the various screens in which you view it on. And it's a journey for the entire media and entertainment industry, but it will happen when we make insights and data-driven decisions. And so it's one of the things that I love about our industry, in that it's competitive in that we do have competitors, but we're all looking to reflect our audiences accurately.
Yeah. So that, we don't have a lot of entertainment companies in the rooms, lots of different industries represented. So how could they apply some of these concepts to their own organizations? And secondarily, how are you sharing it with the industry, right? You're just one company.
Number one, being transparent. We know this one quite well as ESG practitioners. Being transparent, the data that we receive from Annenberg and Stanford, our plan and thus far has been to open source it to the industry. Again, it's not something that we intend to be precious about. It's something that we want all boats to rise. So that's first and foremost. But just, again, ensuring that everything that we do is rooted in the mission of Content for Change, to advance content in a way that will allow us to be able to look back, whether it be from children to great-grandparents and everything in between. That is our real goal and focus around the initiative.
I can't believe we're done. Crystal, thank you so much for coming. We are out of time, but I really appreciate you sharing your vision.
Of course.
Thanks
for having me.
And now it's my pleasure to invite executives from Microsoft, Starbucks, and Nike to stage to talk about collective action, and facilitated in a conversation by Joel McCower.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hump Day at Camelback. No? Is Hump Day one of those over 50 things? I don't know. Right, I don't know. And also, by the way, while we're here, I just, in the spirit of Dylan, I wanted to acknowledge the provider of my wardrobe here, which is my go-to clothier, Forever 64. So
Nice.
So we're going to talk about collective action, partnerships, and how companies are navigating this. And we've been talking about partnerships for a long, long time in this field. But what's interesting is how many different ways they've morphed and grown and changed. And so what we hope to do in the next 20 minutes is really to talk about some of these examples with these three leadership companies. Starting down at this end, Elizabeth Brinton is the Corporate Vice President of Sustainability at Microsoft. And I also want to acknowledge that, because we were raising hands before, that Elizabeth was actually at the very first Greenbiz event when she was at PG&E, and our event was hosted at PG&E headquarters in San Francisco. So kudos to you for still sticking with us for 15 years. In the middle, Michael Kabore, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Starbucks. And Vien Trong, who runs is Senior Director of Engagement, Global Sustainability at Nike. And why we're not having this conversation in Seattle is beyond me. I just don't know. But let's talk about some of the ways that partnerships happen. And one of the things, I want to start with you, Michael. For years, when I'd hear about companies doing leadership things, I'd often say, well, what drove that? And often the answer were two things: Walmart and Greenpeace. And you've got an interesting partnership that you're engaged with, a large partnership, I think, involving Greenpeace and hazardous chemicals. Talk a little bit about it.
Sure. Well, Joel, as I was reflecting, I mean, you and I have been doing this for 25 years, right? And
oh, longer, but yeah.
We don't count.
It's our secret. I think I've been engaged in like 15 of these industry collaborations, and you know most of them. And the one you're asking about is when I was at Levi Strauss & Company leading sustainability there. It started in 2010 when our friends at Greenpeace decided to launch a campaign on footwear and apparel companies. They called it the Detox Campaign, to have us eliminate hazardous chemicals in our supply chains. And so that prompted the industry to get together. We were doing these things independently, but they really got us to get together. Nike was one of the key players, Levi's, Adidas. We got together and we developed something called a manufacturing restricted substances list. We did our research, we did our homework, we got our suppliers involved. Lo and behold, 10 years later, after giving annual progress reports to Greenpeace, 10 years later, the industry has moved forward, pretty much eliminated hazardous chemicals. 80 companies have joined the initiative now. It's a going concern. And don't believe me, believe Greenpeace, because they are publicly saying this has made significant progress, one of the most successful initiatives that they've ever engaged in.
So it's interesting there, just in terms of what I generally don't hear activist groups saying is thank you. now do more, but it's never the thank you, never the acknowledgement. Are you saying that they're sort of off your case now, or are they still on your case and saying, wait, that's not enough, keep going further, faster?
Well, I'm no longer in the apparel industry, so I'm at Starbucks now. But what I can say is, I mean, you can look it up. You can go online and check it out. I mean, if you search, Greenpeace is acknowledging the apparel industry made great strides in eliminating hazardous chemicals.
So what does that do for you internally to have Greenpeace actually acknowledge and in fact celebrate what you're doing? Does that buy you anything?
Well, certainly it's huge credibility with the customer. It's huge credibility with suppliers and for the company. Yes, I mean, it demonstrates for all the companies involved. I mean, and you can talk about Nike, but you know, for all the companies involved, I mean, huge progress made in achieving the impact that we all wanted at the beginning.
Yeah. So, Vien, Nike, through your leadership, is leaning into environmental justice issues at the community level. Talk a little about, first of all, how that came about and what you're actually doing and who's involved.
Yeah, happy to. Well, I want to start with saying thank you first, because over the last couple of days, I have just met incredible folks in the audience, NGOs, consultants, researchers, advocates, tech-based consumer goods, and I've learned a lot. And for me, I think the ongoing work that we have to do is how do we continue to accelerate this work? And I think collective action is absolutely necessary in order for us to move forward. One of the things for me that's been a passion project is how do we continue to do so and make sure that we're thinking about folks who are not necessarily in this room, underserved communities and communities of color that have really been hit first and worst by climate change. What we know across the board is that oftentimes the historic redlining issues, the social inequality issues have left some communities behind. Not only that, they're often the last to receive relief. And so one of the things that we've done in Nike is to think about, as we work across the board with our 79,000 employees, and how we make, move, return products and then transform it all over again. How do we actually work across different functions? And one of the projects we have launched with our social and community impact team, which leads our charitable efforts, is to look at how do we begin to break down some of the silos of our work? How do we find ways to collaborate to address the issues of inclusivity and resiliency in communities? So together we have launched a community climate resiliency program, which looks at doing exactly that, helping to increase the resiliency and inclusivity in the communities in which we want to serve. And we have launched this program in partnership with the Trust for Public Land, working in New York, Chicago, and LA to help support the communities, not only through the work that we have talked about earlier, but also making sure that they're engaging in play and fun and sport and wellness. You know, let's not forget that. It's absolutely crucial. So I encourage everybody to actually learn more about it by coming to our program later this afternoon at 1:30. Our teams will be there. And by the way, one of the things that we say at Nike is get off the sidelines, get into the action, make sure that we're not just looking at what's happening, but be a part of the solution making. And so this event will, at 1:30, will engage folks at tables across the board so we can exchange ideas and continue the conversation on collective action.
So I'll acknowledge that I sort of hate the question, what's the business case, as if there's a business case for destroying the environment and depleting communities. But is this a business activity, or is this philanthropy, or what does this do, if anything, for Nike?
Well, if there's no planet, there's no sport, and there's no way for us to engage sports with kids, right? And so for us, it's deeply integral, which is why it makes me so happy and proud to be at the company, because it allows for us to look at how do we continue to engage kids, right? And not only is it, good for the business case, but it's also about how do we look at that across the board in playgrounds, in schools, and continue to, look at the future for our athletes. Let me just say one more thing. When I say athletes, we say everybody in here is an athlete, because if you have a body, you're an athlete. So we want to make sure that we create access for everybody to engage.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some days feel more athletic than others, but that's another
We'll get you the right shoes for it.
All right. Swoosh, there it is. Okay, good. So So Elizabeth, I know there's a business case at Microsoft for the partnerships you're doing with startups, because your role at Microsoft is specifically to create new business opportunities. Talk a little bit about how you're partnering with startups and just what's that all about?
Well, it's really exciting because if you think about the age of urgency and how we actually collectively do more, we're a platform company, so our job is to create the software that can enable these new business models of the future around physical technologies and other things that actually can solve the climate problems. And so we're looking at, for example, the application of software to help solve energy efficiency. So a great example, this is a cool startup out of Australia. It's called Willow, and they have built a really super granular digital twin technology for advanced energy efficiency on top of the Microsoft Azure and sustainability stack. And then what we're doing for that, they've raised venture capital like a typical startup. And so what we do is we can go together and do a sell with motion in partnership, and that helps them scale so much faster. And then for us as Microsoft, and we measure, and so that has actually shortened our sales cycle by 6 months around really complicated discussions with customers around energy efficiency, as an example. So when you put the two things together we can do more, and you're accelerating and you're building this commercial velocity. And every one of us, we're publicly listed companies. We have to deliver shareholder value. So to me, what's so exciting, thinking about 15 years ago when I was at the first Greenbiz doing a keynote, there was a small group of us with Kermit the Frog, right? And now look at us, it's a movement. And so we're creating velocity in the movement that demonstrates and proves that you can do well by doing good. And that's really exciting.
So you're investing in these startups, and you're helping, and then you're going with them to customers. So you're
creating a commercial ecosystem.
Yeah.
And the commercial ecosystem is then aligned with, again, helping our customers with science-based targets, helping them meet their sustainability objectives. So really, it's about everything coming together. So it's about, you asked about philanthropy, it's about the philanthropic arm all of our companies have. It's about the commercial arm, and then it's extending those partnerships with NGOs and with startups and with other large-scale commercial partners and customers, so that we can together get that flywheel of momentum, so it speeds up.
Yeah. So collaboration partnerships, easy to say, really hard to do. And a lot of the conversations I hear on this topic are, what did you learn about partnering with NGOs or startups? So I want to talk about the internal processes that it takes to get to some of these things. And I'll start with you, Elizabeth, on this. What have you learned about what it takes internally, to get the buy-in, to get the momentum, to create the flywheel?
Well, as building businesses for a long time, one of the things I'll start with a corporate setting like Microsoft, is it's building a coalition. For example, one of the things I did when I got there, we have a community of employees. We have over 9,000 employees. We use Teams and Viva, and those are all volunteers. They all have other day jobs. And so I was like, I crowdsourced with my colleagues all over the world, and I'm like, okay, what are you seeing in your market? What technology should we most urgently apply that's going to meet a need of a customer? And so that huge crowdsourcing of building that momentum and spirit, and then it's building the collaborative framework, and then a very specific governance so that you can, again, get your time to market, make the decisions around your product. And so it is building community inside to and then you have to show the business case. So it's being incredibly pragmatic, partnering with finance, and really showing how the math is going to work.
Obviously, you have to bring in finance because you're making investments. And who else? Just give us a flavor of who else is involved here.
Well, so in a Microsoft context, it is product marketing, it is engineering, it is finance, it is our commercial MCAP sales organization, it's our partnering organization, it is legal on contracting and so forth. I mean, it's pretty much everybody. And so the key bit of wisdom to pass along is a key skill set: learn how to really collaborate. Yeah. And what that means is you have to be, on the one hand, a passionate, annoying person to drive change, and at the same time you have to have so much resiliency, because you have to be the one that wakes up every day, we were talking about this, every day being like on it, passionate, and so a no is never a no.
Yeah. Vienne, what have you learned about internally making this kind of change happen, particularly because, communities are both your market and they're also an opportunity, as you're saying. So what have you learned about that? Who's involved?
I've learned to continue to be dogged and determined, for sure, continue to stay passionate about this issue. But more than that, what I've learned is there's a number of others inside of the company who care deeply as well, and some who really care deeply but want to learn even more. So what we have learned to do is we brought in leaders to help speak to our employee resource groups, to really bring people who are interested but not yet sure how to engage. And so, for instance, we brought in African American leaders to our Black employee resource group. We brought in Latinx leaders from different NGOs across the board, leaders who are LGBTQ, Latinx, women, Asian descent, and coming into employee resource groups to say, what is climate change doing to our communities? How do we better understand it? And how do we continue to amplify and collaborate with them as we move forward? And actually, it has been hugely encouraging how excited employee resource groups have been and continue to invest in these organizations. On top of that, we have the benefit of having leaders who care deeply about these issues, including our CEO, who came in with this as being one of his top priorities. So that really helps unlock solutions across the board. And truly, I think what Elizabeth said is right. We have to make sure that we have the ability to work across the board with leaders who are just passionate about this issue and find solutions across the board. That's where innovation really continues.
Yeah, so same question to you, Michael. What does it take at Starbucks to have these kinds of partnerships with Greenpeace and a number of and how many companies are involved with this ZDHC zero discharge?
So that wasn't Starbucks, that was Levi's, and it was about 80 companies in the apparel sector. I would say for Starbucks, as we explore partnerships, and one of the partnerships that I'm very excited about these days at Starbucks is something called the Water Resilience Coalition.
Oh, yes, right.
That we're part of, that Microsoft is a part of. It's 25 CEOs of big companies, us, Microsoft, AB InBev, Cargill, Ecolab. It's the CEO level that is coming together. The long-term goal is net positive water. But the shorter-term goal, 2030 goal, is that we are investing in 100 threatened water basins all around the world. 100 threatened water basins around the world.
Yeah.
And the great thing about it, Joel, is we've gotten our teams involved, and we're doing a project with Nature Conservancy in China. So our China team is very involved in water, it's watershed restoration in a big watershed, big lake in China, Qingdao Lake in China, one of the biggest freshwater lakes in China. And we're doing sustainable ag, better farming practices. We're doing wetland restoration. And the local team is engaged and involved. We have these other big companies involved with TNC. And I think, Joel, to me, this is the future because we're talking about the watershed. So it's not a single issue anymore. Yes, it's based on water, but we're looking at land use practices. We're looking at biodiversity. We're looking at environmental pollution.
Equity issues.
Right? All of these things in the watershed, and it's not just us, right? It's all these companies outside of our own four walls contributing to the landscape, what us old school guys would call the ecosystem. Right? And this is where it's headed. And I know a lot of, right, WBCSD is working on these kinds of landscape issues as well.
So we've just got about a minute left for each of you, and I want to ask you a tough question to see if you can just give me, like, some of these things take a long time to manifest and to be successful. How do you know, and I'm going to start with you, Vian, that something is working as opposed to, let's move on to something else? What point do you get that?
I think for us, what we have committed to doing is continue to do this work for the long haul. It's why we have developed partnerships with our suppliers over 30 to 40 years. We have been doing this work in sustainability for decades, and we continue to do so moving forward. And so for us, what I would encourage us to do is not actually make the determination that it's not working too soon. Because for us to advance sustainability, we have to do that across the board with many different stakeholders and really invest in these partnerships for the long haul.
Yeah. Patience, Michael, is that your advice or making these things work?
I'll quote one of my favorite entertainers, Elvis Presley.
Okay.
A little less conversation, a little more action, please.
All right.
And picking up on action, what I would say is this is where partnerships are really important, is because success in a business context changes, and who's the best owner for a business, what's the best stage changes. And so that's okay. And so recognizing, giving yourself permission to change the ownership of an asset, to exit a company, to spin out a company, to scale a business. These are all normal life cycle stages. And then when you understand that and you have an ecosystem approach, you can actually see success at each stage.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many pieces that go into these things and so much patience, determination, ecosystem building, relationship, maintenance, and again, patience, because these things do take time. But I think this has been really helpful to get a flavor of all the different possibilities and to see what and how leadership companies like Nike, Starbucks, and Microsoft are moving this forward. Please join me in thanking our panel.
Thank you.
And now I want to welcome back to the stage from WM, Monica Ruin, to give us an update on our zero waste journey. Monica?
Hey, everybody. So based on our backlog of recycling, it looks like everyone had an okay time last night. I'm excited to let you know how we're doing. Can I have a bit of a drum roll, please? We're on track. So with a bit of an asterisk we are slightly behind in sorting of some of the material. I don't know that I mentioned to you all yesterday that despite all of the efforts we put in place to get things sorted before it leaves the house, we have back of house, last line of defense, where there's a team out there hand sorting all the material to correct any contamination that does happen. Because of the weather, we weren't able to do all of the sorting of TerraCycle bins, as well as what will inevitably be the small percentage of landfill. So this graph here has an estimate of what we expect based on previous years, adjusted towards the higher attendance this year, but we expect to hit goals here. The recycling number will increase once we get through the morning's waste that was on there. However, always room for improvement. One request, again, same request, same ask for your participation in the program, is to pay attention to labels and signage on bins and around the site. Despite all of our hopes and desires, unfortunately, those to-go coffee cups are neither recyclable or compostable in standard systems, and we have a standard system here on site, which is what we're working in. So if you do bring those on site, I know this room is probably the highest percentage of those that carry around their travel mugs with them wherever you go. One, let's use them. Two, if not, go ahead and leave those disposable coffee cups on these trays that you see located around the area, or empty in a TerraCycle break room bin. No, I say empty there. We're in a drought. Let's drink up all of our liquids. Hydration is good. It helps keep the material clean, make jobs a lot easier for both the sorting team, as well as protect the integrity of any paper or vulnerable recyclables in those streams. One last thing I would love to get y'all to help us with is, throughout the materials management process, there's a lot of hands, a lot of people involved. Oftentimes it's things that happen behind the scenes. They don't get the credit necessarily deserved, or the thank you for that. So I want to give one big thank you to the banquet staff, the housekeeping staff, the kitchen staff, the WM sorting staff, the WM drivers. I could go on forever. On the count of 3, could we all say thank you together? 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Awesome. Thanks, y'all.
And thanks to Monica. Before we continue, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that we're holding this event on unceded Native American land, And that Arizona is home to 22 tribal nations who were the original inhabitants of this place that we are all lucky to be here experiencing today. So, change management. It always sounds so good, right? But what if the way we manage change and the way we in sustainability lead change needs to change? Our next speaker is a strategist and psychologist whose work gets to exactly that. Please welcome to the stage Renee Lertzman.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Dylan. So I'm incredibly honored to be here with you all today at this event. I want to actually ask us to just take a few seconds, because it's been a very full couple of days already, and just breathe. So if you want to join with me in just like taking a collective deep breath in. Just allow ourselves to arrive here in this space, this incredible gift that Greenbiz has offered us. It's really quite amazing. So I do existential change management. And why do I say existential? And why do I call what I do change management? Because truly, everything that I do and everything that you do actually goes to the heart of what it means to be a human being. If you think about it, every aspect of what you all do and what we've been talking about has to do with who we are as humans, and what does it mean to be a human right now, and what does it mean to be a human in the future. So it's really nothing less than that. And I'm inviting us to really step into that, because I think it's been sort of missing. Like, we get really pulled into the technical and the political and the economic, but really it's change management. So when I thought about this talk and what I'm asking of myself in this moment, and what I'm asking of you in this moment, is to really reflect on how we are showing up in this work. How are we showing up in this work? And as a psychologist, I am going to ask us to do some self-reflection for the next several minutes. So I'm going to start by sharing some of my own story as a bit of a guide into kind of how I have navigated this question of how to show up in this time of existential change management. So when I was growing up, I was very sensitive to what was going on in the family. And when my dad was having a hard time, I would leave little notes for him in his briefcase that would say things like, "You got this," or "I believe in you," or "I'm proud of you." So what I was doing is I was taking it on myself to be a bit of a cheerleader, right? I'm like, if I can inspire my dad, he will get through his problems. So I tried out being a cheerleader, and what I found is that doesn't necessarily work, right? Like, it's not necessarily on me to try to cheer or inspire or motivate to help someone. Went to college, learned about environmental issues. Like many of us, felt totally alarmed and freaked out. Signed up to be a canvasser, went door to door. Any of you do that? Trying to convince people to care about these issues, and basically saying why this is the right thing to do. Writing. I got burnt out very fast. I won't tell you how long I lasted canvassing, but it was very short. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to graduate school, I'm going to get a PhD, I'm going to become a researcher, and I'm going to educate people. And so I did that, and I started getting commissions for like incredible research papers and landscape reports. And to me at that time, a white paper was like unbelievably exciting. So if I was asked to do a white paper, I'd be like, oh my God, this is incredible. Did a lot of them at some big global NGOs with lots of stakeholders, and actually found out, you know what, that was not leading to the change that I was going for. It was very intense. It was a real soul-searching moment for me. So I ended up going into a training around 2015 called a training about something called motivational interviewing. That's actually a methodology in the public health sector that very few of us know about, which is the most evidence-based approach to behavior change that exists. I was in a room full of clinicians and doctors. I was the only non-clinical person, the only one from the climate and environmental sector, and everyone was there to learn how to help people change. And it was incredibly humbling, because I realized along with this group that I had to unlearn everything I thought I knew about change, and I am a psychologist, okay? So there we were having to learn that it's not about educating. I'm sorry, that's not necessarily what's gonna get us there. It's not necessarily about inspiring and motivating people. It's not necessarily about scaring and pressuring people or telling them why they have to quit smoking because it's the right thing to do. That does not work. But what works is something called guiding. Guiding comes out of motivational interviewing. And I realized that I had to learn how to be a guide. And it's actually really hard. I'm a pushy person. If any of you know or have worked with me, I can be very intense. And I think a lot of us in this room are very passionate and very committed, and we tend to lead with that energy. So guiding is about how to be a change maker, how to be a helper, a healer, a servant leader, but really from the point of view of how to guide versus push. And that's really the journey I've been on and that I'm inviting us into. So I want to take us on a quick tour around what does it mean to be a guide, and this is going to be a little quick now, so bear with me. One of the key things about guiding is that you have to have the courage and humility to interrogate our theories of change, right? You have to be willing to say, am I doing this right? What is BSci all that there is? You know, is messaging all that there is? So I'm going to give you a tour of the movement in 60 seconds. Get ready. Okay. 1970s, 1980s, the focus was very much on behavioral science, behavioral economics, nudging, incentives, levers, motivating. All of that language comes out of behavioral economics. Very much dominated the space. Messaging came online in the 90s, all about the messaging, all about the language, all about the framing, storytelling, narrative. Became a messaging problem, became the messaging theory of change. 2000s, IDEO, thank you for those of you here from IDEO, really introduced design thinking to scale for social issues. Paul Hawken, you know, design thinking, systems thinking came on board, and that has really dominated the space. So that's where we really focus on using accelerators, incubators, design thinking, innovation, tech, speed and scale, obviously influenced by the tech sector and the innovation sector, startups, all of that. That's a huge theory of change. And what's been happening more recently, I mean, I've been at this about 30 years, but it's now happening more, where we're recognizing that this work is actually about relationships. It's about trust. It's about how we're feeling. It's about how we're experiencing these issues. And that if we skip that, if we bypass that, all of this amazing work, which frankly is all incredibly needed and powerful, is actually not effective. It's not going to get us there. So this is sort of like this ingredient in the mix. And so what I want to invite us to think about is how 2023 is the year of integration. I want to challenge us all to integrate our theories of change, which is a kind of innovation that is on equal par to any kind of software development that there is. This is where the traction is. We are humans. We have to get this right. So what does this mean practically? And again, this is going to seem maybe a little fast, but just go with me here. What it means is really tuning into what I call the 3 A's, which is anxiety, ambivalence, and aspiration. Because if you start listening and talking with people, you're going to hear some anxiety. You're going to hear ambivalence, which is dilemmas. That's the big headline. Dilemmas. I want to do this, I don't want to do this, I feel stuck, I feel pulled. We have to be really good at understanding and listening for ambivalence, because guiding is about navigating through ambivalence. It's about leading people through. And aspiration is where we all want to live 100% of the time. And we have to learn how to temper and kind of tap into the aspirations. So again, in the spirit of integration, I also want to invite us to think about the lens of education and see if we can think of it more as about engagement, right? Because I've been hearing a lot about we have to educate people. Well, really, we have to engage people. So what does it mean? What are some takeaways as far as how you can start guiding? I'm going to go through this quickly because I'm out of time, but first off is about having compassion for yourself. I know that might come as a surprise, but it's really important to have compassion for yourself as a change maker, because you can't extend that compassion to anyone else unless you have it for yourself. We have to have the courage and ability to self-reflect, to really look at ourselves and see this as part of this work and not as a waste of time. We want to honor all of these parts of ourselves, okay? There's nothing wrong with these, but what I'm wanting us to consider is how to grow into the guiding mode. And to really sort of accept this moment of existential change management and really see this as a collective moment that we have as a community to live and lead from our best and highest selves. So we have to ask deeper questions and take the time to really listen for what comes. This is about slowing down. It's about paying attention to the relationships that we have and really embodying the spirit of guiding, which is really about love. It's about resilience, and it's about presence. And I know that we can do this, but we actually really need to do it together. This is not a solo job. We've got to come together and support each other. So I hope that this sparks some vulnerable conversations and connection amongst this community. And as you go out from this conference tomorrow, take some of this with you into your conversations. And I know that we can do this. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Renee. As more companies have recognized the power of innovation to transform their value chains, we've seen more companies launch startup accelerators. But what is it like to be the founder of a sustainability startup being accelerated? For our final panel for today, we have startup expert Shantae Harris, who will ask 2 founders exactly that. We have joining her from Toronto, Santiago Espinosa de los Monteros, and from Earthos, Nuha Siddiqui. Please welcome them.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shantae Harris. As Dylan mentioned, I'm so thrilled to be here for this session. I've been an operator and an investor in the climate tech space for the past several years and have really seen firsthand what does it look like for startups to work effectively with corporations, and what does it look like for corporate leaders to understand how to partner with sustainability startups. The title of this session is A Brave New World for Sustainability Startups, and I really see that as an opportunity and really a timely way for all of us in this room to start thinking about not only strategies for innovation, but how do you integrate sustainability companies and startups into your supply chain, your operations, your logistics. And I think for many folks in this room that are leading strategies internally at corporates, do that effectively and make your life easier. So I'm really excited to dive into startups and corporate innovation because it's where I've sat throughout my career, and really to highlight these two founders who are building incredible innovations in their respective spaces. So with that, I'm going to pass it to you both, and I think I'll kick us off by asking, what are you building? What's your company? And, tell us a little bit about the actual innovation that you've created. I can start with you, Nuha.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Nuha. I'm co-founder and CEO of Earthos, and we're creating plant-powered alternatives for traditional plastics. We focus on designing materials that are both environmentally sustainable, but also fully compatible to existing supply chains. Earthos didn't start as a business. It started off as a research project that I was kicking off with my co-founders at the University of Toronto. We initially came together because we were all deeply passionate about finding a way to challenge the status quo of plastics. We didn't come from the background, we didn't have decades of experience in this space, but we found that there was an opportunity to really redefine how we think about biomaterials and how it could really truly add value to some of the major complex challenges we have with plastics. Today, we are a team of 20. We're based in Canada. We've officially launched with some really exciting CPGs and brands like AB InBev. We've expanded across 4 different applications, over 20 different industries, and we're excited for what's next.
Awesome. Thank you. Santiago, please.
Thanks a lot. I do want to say the chairs are as comfy as they just if anyone is wondering. Yeah, incredible chairs. Now, my name is Santiago. Very happy to be here. Toroto is a company, a family-started company. We do ecosystem restoration, large-scale ecosystem restoration and conservation. And we're mainly focused on working with corporates that want to increase ecosystem services inside their supply chain. Why? Because they need them. We need water to make food, we need soil to make food, we need carbon removals to have a healthy ecosystem, we need biodiversity corridors. These are all fundamental, and it is really important that we learn how to manage ecosystems in a way that all of these services can be enhanced, and more so if these services are being offered by nature to corporate supply chains and to corporate value chains, particularly in the food and beverage sector. Now, what's really cool is that most of these nature-based solutions are going to be implemented in the Global South. Around 90% of them are going to be implemented in the Global South over the next 5 to 10 years. And the Global South has lots of communities. Up to half of the land in countries like Mexico, 30% in Colombia, Peru is a little bit higher, belongs to indigenous or agrarian communities. So enhancing ecosystem services throughout the value chains of these corporations necessarily is also about doing social work with these communities.
Amazing. Thank you both for walking us through your innovations. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the why. We have a lot of folks here from, I'm sure, different paths, many of which are working internally at major corporations. You all both decided to launch startups, which is no small feat. And so I'm curious if you can share a little bit more about, why you decided to go down this route and what really inspired you to do so.
Nuha?
Yeah, I think that obviously both of us are tackling some really, really big problems. But if I think back to the moment that I realized that I wanted to address it head on and actually take that role, I was just frustrated and I was impatient. And I think that's a common trait that you'll see with a lot of entrepreneurs and founders is that we feel a sense of responsibility to change what our future looks like. And it's really uncomfortable and it's very scary in a lot of different ways. But I couldn't imagine being in any other position than what I'm doing today. So I'm very thankful for that. But I think that everyone feels that sense of frustration in some way when we see what our future is looking like, and either you can take it on yourself to take control of that and actually try to change it, or you can stand by, and I wanted to take control of it.
Amazing. Yeah, and I know, Santiago, you've talked a lot about ecosystem. I think we heard that in the previous panel before us. How do you actually bring together stakeholders and have an impact? So really curious to hear more about your why.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So, I mean, number one was researching how much forest we've lost as a species, right? About half of the world's forests are gone. And then starting to ask questions around what is blocking us from recovering all of that forest cover by the year 2100, for example. No? And we see three major issues. Number one, there is a transparency issue. When a corporation invests in climate action activities, particularly territorial climate action activities that include several stakeholders, they don't have enough information to de-risk investments as much as possible, to make sure best standards are being applied, what's happening with the money, are the landowners being sufficiently paid, this kind of thing. But also landowners, when they have climate action activities happening in their territory, or they are producing stuff like carbon credits, they don't know who is buying them, who is financing, at what price, when, if the project developer is being truthful or not. And this is, of course, a lot about relationship and trust building, like we were listening a few seconds ago, but also about transparency. And transparency has to do with equal access to information. So unless landowners in the Global South and companies in the global, in the entire globe can have access to the same tiers of information, it's going to be very hard. But maybe the problem that struck us the most is operational scalability at the field level. There's billions, potentially trillions, going to be invested into nature-based solutions over the next few decades. And if you want to reforest 1,000 hectares, you need to be able to produce 1 million trees locally, using local seeds, which necessitates full-time seed gathering squads operating the whole of the year to gather high-quality seeds from different species, a whole diversity of vegetation species and not just one. So, or for example, for regenerative agriculture, you need organic fertilizer. So there is a supply chain of ecosystem restoration that we need to carefully build together. And of course, one of the best ways to do it is to build it inside the supply chain of corporates who need their value chain to be enhanced through better ecosystem services being provided in the land of indigenous and agrarian communities. This is sort of the motivation and the why that brought us to work into this space.
Yeah, that's a big one. Thank you. And I think what I heard from both of you is there's a sense of urgency, and a lot of times innovation really is the outcome of folks asking the right questions and how do we move faster, right, to solve major problems like the climate crisis. I think you started to, Santiago, get into the actual implementation processes of corporates. I'm really curious, Nuha, we talked about this as well leading up to this conversation. How can both corporates and startups think about this mutual value add? I think sometimes when we talk about this space, it's, startups are coming to disrupt, there's a lot of risk involved, but not always as much focus on how startups are actually effectively helping corporations reach their goals, right? And integrating into their supply chain. So would really love to hear from you both. What does value add on both sides look like?
Yeah, maybe on the value add from a startup side. So when we started working with corporates, we were still very early in our journey. So we knew that we wanted to create a bio alternative for plastics, but we didn't really know how to fit it into existing systems. And so I feel like when we worked with corporates at those very early stages, we were able to learn so much about what we actually needed to build. And as a startup, one of our greatest assets is being able to pivot and change the business to service our partners in our industry. And so we took a lot of those learnings early on to help us define our go-to-market, define what we thought of our business model and our actual materials themselves. So that was extremely valuable for us and what we continue to do even when we work with new partners.
Yeah, and I know you didn't get into the story, but we were chatting yesterday, and I think what's so fascinating about your company, and it sounds like the growth journey is really you all had an original thesis around your solution and then started to do customer discovery and talk to corporates and realize, wait, there's a larger ecosystem problem that we can solve, and have really pivoted into, I think, supporting the entire industry in a way that other startups aren't. So I think that was really great to hear. Amazing. Santiago?
I mean, we're working with corporates. It's very important to realize that the business cycles are probably going to be straining the capital of any startup. And this is, there's a lot corporates can do to make this easier, but still, it's going to be hard because we're talking about two players with very different sizes. So definitely I would say, really high-quality financial management is super important for any climate startup that wants to work with actual value chains. And for us, the inspiration is that, right? We can reforest, we can do biomaterials, but if we're not able to insert this inside the most impactful value chains throughout the world, then it's not going to be applied in a scalable way. And this is something that I think all founders really need to understand when approaching climate tech ventures or climate ventures, period, right? Now, from the perspective of corporates, I think one of the key successes of the programs we've been through, I think, is corporates are actually working together to solve similar challenges that they might have, because not one corporate can do it together. So I'd love to maybe explore more on that topic, but I think those would be the two main yellow flags for both corporates and startups as they approach these issues.
Yeah, I love this mention of collaboration. It reminds me of a conversation I had with the utility about 2 years ago, where they're like, look, we want to integrate more innovative solutions into our operations. At the end of the day, we're not the only player in this industry. And so what does it look like for us to create almost a consortium of folks and players in our industry that can come together and really think about innovating, right, or incorporating innovations into supply chain and operations. So I really think, this question of, well, how do startups think about the ecosystem and then think about really all of the budgeting, the finances, so that you make sustainability executives' jobs easier, quite frankly. I did want to talk a little bit about either an example, and I know we don't have much time left, but maybe if you two, or one of you even, have an example of how you've done that effectively or what that looks like, I think that'd be interesting for the audience. You want to go?
I mean, for us, the main thing has been being able to work with amazing partners, for example, at AB InBev, now the Coca-Cola company, potentially other participants in that accelerator, such as Colgate-Palmolive or Unilever, working with them in collaboration to make capital move faster. It's super important. Startups will definitely not bring the capital to the table. That is what corporates can bring. And sometimes when you're talking about 120-day payment terms or 90-day payment terms, it might be up to 60% of the total cash available to that startup. So that would be my number one thing that I think the corporates that we've worked with have done to enable this kind of work.
Yeah, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would add there is that the success stories that we have had with partners is when they truly are ready to commit to the process. I think that on the corporate side, when they're starting to engage with startups like us, you have to really commit and you have to be 100% in, because the last thing you want is for startups to spend all this time and resources on a pilot project or a certain solution that doesn't actually scale. And so I think it's just so important to make sure those expectations are really, really clear from the very beginning.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I know Dylan alluded to this in her introduction, but a lot of corporates are, either launching or have recently launched accelerator and incubation programs, and I think seeing firsthand how those are a really great entry point, and oftentimes founders need to know, well, what comes after that, right? So now that you've seen our innovation or we've been incorporated into some of your R&D processes, how can we actually integrate right into the projects that make sense? I put a poll out before this session, so thank you to everyone that responded, and I think overwhelmingly I got pretty positive responses and yeses to this idea of, okay, not only can corporates, of course, invest in a startup from a VC arm if you have one, or even think about launching a pilot project, but I think what's so interesting about both Santiago and Nuha's solutions is that there's really an opportunity to fund the projects that make sense for you internally within a corporation. And so what does it look like to move past R&D and initial VC investment to, hey, we have this specific challenge in our supply chain, how can we actually fund that project and make that useful for the corporation as a whole, as well as the startup? And I think I've been seeing that from a lot of startups. So I will end there, but I also want to give you two really quickly an opportunity to say, what is one tip that you would give to a lot of the corporate execs sitting here?
Nuha, you gave a brilliant tip this morning when asked a similar question.
I said a one-liner, work with startups. Very simple. Thank you. But I would say that it's just really important that we all make some bold bets. I think in the startup world, we're used to being on tight runways. We're constrained by a lot of different situations. And that puts us into this sort of wartime mindset. And the climate crisis requires all of us to be in that wartime mindset where we're taking some really big, bold moves and we're facing life or death. And so that gives me a lot of hope to see how everyone's changing their mindsets and working with startups, working with early stage companies, and I'm excited for the future.
Absolutely. I would also say form relationships with the startups that you're working with. Actually, for us, it's been a blessing to meet so many great people inside these corporates. And having actual relationships with these people helps tackle the problems in a creative, open manner without necessarily faking it at all. And being conscious about our limitations and aspirations and dreams and problems is super, super useful to move this kind of work forward.
Amazing. So make bold moves and form real relationships, right, with startups that can help you reach your goals. Thank you all for joining us for this session.
Thank you. And with that, our keynote program has come to a close, but your Greenbiz Day is just beginning. I want to hear all about it at 5:15 at the networking reception, which will again be on the Sonoran Terrace and in the West Foyer, because it's going to be a little bit chilly. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and happy Greenbiz.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing that we keep hearing is we're not doing enough fast enough. And, you know, one of the things that always strikes me is like we're talking to a room of people who are very passionate about this. How do we broaden this message? How do we bring more people into this conversation? But, you know, overall, just a really interesting couple days of content and a lot of learning. I learned a lot. How about you?
I would echo what you say, or what you said just now, and just reiterate kind of what I keep picking up, which is that the work is far from done. Clearly, that's why you and I both have jobs. That's why these conferences continue to need to happen. But just because it's far from done doesn't mean that there isn't a really, really qualified and passionate group of people here to get that work done. Yeah. And that's just what I keep having to come back to. Because if not, you get bogged down in the doom and gloom, and nobody needs that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we will be back in 20 minutes with 4 interviews, one with our colleague Brian Lewis, a couple more with some great companies doing some great work. So stick with us, watch some content. We'll see you in 20 minutes.
See you soon.
A tree can be an answer to our global challenges. It's time the world knew everything a tree can be. Let's plant more trees where they're needed most. Let's grow a better tomorrow.
In the South Bay, from self-sorting recycling bins to water made out of the air, incredible innovations have been at the forefront of the Verge climate event. ABC 7 News reporter Dustin Dorsey explains how the Bay Area could benefit from solutions to some of our biggest problems.
How can we solve the climate crisis our world is facing? A question experts are always asked, and many of them have had some of those solutions on display this week at the Verge Climate Technology event in San Jose.
Here we have the energy systems, the transportation systems, the food systems, carbon markets. You look at the whole system and bring everybody together. So you've got the innovation ecosystem, the entrepreneurs, big corporates, municipalities, all coming together to really figure out the solutions.
In the heart of Silicon Valley, innovations tackling some of the biggest issues we're facing, from waste with a robot trash can that sorts recyclables on its own, to energy with this microgrid on site that's literally powering the main stage for the big event. This can help reduce energy bills and limit the usage on the power grid during peak hours. We know there's no easy answer to climate change, but we do know experts are on the verge of worldwide solutions.
It's all about moving this technology forward.
In San Jose, Dustin Dorsey, ABC 7 News.
Wow, look at Verge.
I know.
Yeah.
I think about collaboration. I think about leadership being about collaboration, empowering people
We have to think of being catalysts for the things that are absolutely essential.
Those business leaders in this room, I think it's exactly what you should expect of your state. We have audacious goals. And if our goals are intended to be achieved, then we've got to back those goals up with real action and real investment.
Emissions come from corporations, how we power our society. And so if we're going to solve the climate problem, it's going to start and end with corporations. And the question is really whether we have the courage to do so.
Griffith from Rewiring America, a policy and advocacy shop working on the electrification of everything. And this is me talking to you about the state of electrification for Verge 2022. It's been a bad year, but I want you to know we are winning. It doesn't feel like it. There's the war in Ukraine. That's driving up energy prices. That's creating inflation as a major problem. The Supreme Court is hostile to climate action, and Build Back Better appears cancelled. But I want to reassure you that the macroeconomics of electrifying everything, the fact that it's inflation-proof, is on our side. Let's look at the global electricity supply, the 25-year history. Coal, on its way out now. Oil and gas also appears to have turned that corner despite a recent rebound after COVID. Hydro, the historical mainstay, is still doing well. Nuclear is slowly falling off as earlier plants retire. That probably won't happen forever. But the story of today is this incredible rise in solar and wind we can see since 2010 that has now surpassed nuclear energy in its contributions to the global electricity supply. If you keep pushing that forward another 20 years, we will in fact be able to supply the entire world's energy supply with green electricity by 2040. That means we're more on target than you might think. But we do have a guy who tells us that inflation is the reason not to electrify, and what I really want to show you now is why inflation is exactly the reason we should electrify. So, for example, let's look at the historical price of electricity. Up and up and up and up. We can look at the underlying price of coal that generated that electricity, and you can see it has been increasing, although because the demand for coal is going down, the price is easing a little bit. Coal is definitively in the US on the way out. You can see it dropping from close to 60% 25 years ago to less than 20% of the supply today. It'll make its way out by 2030 on its own. Here's the retail price of gasoline compared to the underlying price of oil. You can see the very, very high volatility over the last 25 years. You can see the price spikes in 2007. You can see the price spikes that we're feeling right now at the pump. Retail gas has been pretty constant. We can see that the underlying wholesale gas was going up and up through 2007, but then the fracking revolution happened. It made gas very, very cheap in the US, but we didn't really see that passed on in our retail prices, although we see the volatility and the seasonality going up. As with residential electricity, we can look over the last 25 years. The US average, incredibly constant. You can see it goes up in the summer for air conditioning, goes down a little bit in the winter, and you can see that seasonality all the way growing from about 8 cents in 97 to around 13 or 14 cents on average this year. There are states where it's lower, like Nebraska. There are states where it's higher, like California and Hawaii, where we have the highest uptake of rooftop solar. There's a hint there, is because it had the highest electricity price, and so it was the place where rooftop solar was first economically competitive. Why don't we look at these energy prices against inflation, though? In fact, the residential electricity price that you can see here nearly perfectly tracks the CPI. So why don't we actually look at the retail energy cost in cents per kilowatt hour of everything we do and compare that to the CPI? You can see electricity, pretty constant, tracking the CPI. Gasoline, also if we draw the trend line, tracks the CPI pretty closely, as does natural gas. And that's, in fact, they are a large portion of how we calculate the consumer price index. But here's the revolution that I want to clue you into that I have the advantage of seeing because I work a little bit in Australia, where rooftop solar, and you can see it, is $1 a watt. In the US a few years ago, it was $3 a watt. Steady progress. We're on our way to $2 a watt. Once you get that, means cost goes down from 20 cents to 13. You'll eventually see it to 5 to 6 cents a kilowatt hour, which is what Australians enjoy already today. So we know this is possible in a highly developed country. The other revolution that is happening, obviously, is in batteries. 10 years ago, if you're buying wholesale cells, they were $1,000 a kilowatt hour. Out of the factory gate now, they're $150 a kilowatt hour less. At retail, they used to be $2,000 a kilowatt hour. Depending on whether it's on the side of your house or inside your car, it's now $200 to $500. Those prices are going to keep going down. What's really astonishing about that can be seen in this graph. Again, we see electricity price rising and rising. We know that there will be inflation in the future, and that will continue to rise on a similar history to the last 25 years. But if you buy rooftop solar and a battery today, you lock in a constant price. But we see that as the years progress, that price is coming down and down and down. And so we have an inflation-proof source of zero-emission clean energy that is now competitive in most markets, and in countries like Australia, it's competitive absolutely all day and everywhere. Here it is again, just to now talk about it in terms of the retail prices. Obviously, a gasoline car, you got to penalise by a factor of 3 because it uses more than 3 times as much energy to go the same mile. Similarly with natural gas, if you can use an electric heat pump to heat your water, it uses 1/3 the energy of your natural gas. So adjusting those, you can see the retail cost in cents per kilowatt hour for heat, for driving, for electricity, and then I can show you that inflation-proof price that's already happening in Australia and is soon to come in the US is going to forevermore mean that doing everything in your life with electricity is the cheapest way to do it, and it's inflation-proof for 20 years into the future. Here again, here's the trend for fossil. Let's make it really basic. Up and up and up, increasing volatility, especially into the future, because we'll have more and more supply chain upheaval as we're weaning ourselves off in a fairly lumpy way the remaining coal plants and the remaining natural gas. At the same time, the cost of batteries, the cost of solar, the cost of wind continues to go down faster than inflation goes up. And so as we go further and further into the future, this new competitor that will soon be an incumbent just gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. You can already see it, not just residentially, but on the grid as a whole. You can see coal on the way out. Here at the bottom, you can see gas has largely replaced it, but is starting to slow down at that effort. Nuclear is fading out. Hydro is consistent. But again, since about 2010, wind absolutely rocking forward in the US and globally. Solar also since about 2015, the economics are starting to work, rocketing ahead in its contributions to the grid. So if we draw those 2000 to 2020 growth curves for wind and for solar in percent of electricity supplied, we then see them shooting off into the future, providing this decade and next decade more than 50%, and very soon afterwards 100% of the energy that Americans need. No better proof of the revolution. This is not a linear transition. You can't model this in the dumb, simple way that the International Energy Agency does with some straight line. This is going to be very disruptive, and the automotive companies absolutely show you that. The tailpipe goes away, we're going to plug in these cars, and these are the commitments of when these major brands will go all electric. 2025 for Jaguar, 2026 for Audi, 26 again for Mini, 2027 for Alfa Romeo, 2028 for Rolls-Royce if you can afford one. And of course we have all electric companies, Tesla, BYD, already crushing it and having the best growth in their stock. Here's the inevitable trend and the reason this is happening. Everything is starting to get to scale. This is known as the Swanson's curve. This is the price reduction in solar every time we double the amount that we produce. Basically 20% off every time we double the global production rate. We're going to double it again, and double it one more time. The same is going to happen for wind, which is falling at 14% every doubling. and 21% is the rate that batteries are coming down. Electrification cost is inevitably coming down for a long time to come. You can see in history, let's look at red dye, let's look at insulin, let's look at video, let's look at cameras, corn, nails, coal, car tires. Once the transition starts to happen within 25 years, it accelerates and is nearly done, and you get 100% penetration of the new incumbent. This is the revolution we are seeing. It's already happening. Governments can speed it up, but they can't really slow it down. So here, let's get serious. We got to say, how are we doing against our climate goals? This is the 1.5 degree curve of that we'd have to hit if we wanted to do no negative emissions. That's where the more than 50% target by 2030 in emissions reductions comes from. 2 degrees buys us a less good climate, but a little more time. But you can see here, if we project forward the rate of those renewables being deployed, along with some nuclear, we can be all electric by 2040 or 2050 and zero emission. We may not be as fucked as you think. So that's one piece of the good news story. The industry is now on target to hit our climate goals as long as we keep the foot to the floor, and you can only expect international governments to get more ambitious in their commitments, automotive companies to get more ambitious in their commitments as time goes on. But let's turn not from the macroeconomic story, which I think is good, but let me talk about the underlying microeconomics, which I think is the most compelling reason of all to do this. Here's your house. Here's your cars, and this is what we're all going to be doing. We're going to be electrifying because the economics just make sense for your house. We're going to put solar on the roof, then we're going to follow it with a battery. We'll electrify the load center or the fuse box. We'll electrify the kitchen, the water heater, the heating, the first car, the second car. And that means your household will go from a picture like this, where today, every month, you send a check to the electricity company. That money leaves your house, it leaves your suburb. Then you also buy gasoline every week. That's money that leaves your house, leaves your suburb. Doesn't create very many jobs where you live, if any at all. You buy natural gas to heat your home. That's money that leaves your house, leaves your zip code, probably leaves your state. Not really benefiting your house at all. Let's fast forward to the future. Here's your same house. Now you have solar on the roof. It's receiving that free sunshine. You had to invest in it, yes. You'll only need to buy a small amount of electricity from the grid. That'll still have to happen just to make sure it works all year round and all day long. But the money you've invested in your rooftop solar and the electrification is going to be savings returned to your household. In the US, those savings by 2030 could be as easily be as $2,000 to $4,000 per year per household. That's a good story for your house, but remember, your house lives in a community. You live in a community. Electricity is literally the thing that connects us, physically connects every household, everything we do as a community. In 2022, your community is spending, if you think of a community or a suburb as about 1,000 households, they're spending about $20 million a year on fossil fuels, and that's money on a one-way ticket outside of your community. If we rather invest in your community, invest in the electrification of your community, by 2032, the majority of that $20 million could be returning in a virtuous circle back in your community. And of course, that means local savings. That's going to buy new classrooms, that's going to buy new swimming pools, that's going to pave the roads, and it's going to create a huge number of jobs. The virtuous circle of electrification is that it works locally and improves every community. This is the abundance agenda, electrification. Part of that abundance is we no longer have to think about just trying really hard to get 100% renewable. We have to think about true abundance over supply. Here's how the US will electrify. Industry grinds along constantly year round. The commercial sector uses a little more heat in the winter, a little more air conditioning in the summer, and a little more heat in the winter again. And you can see the shape of that curve. We drive roughly the same amount all year round. So transportation just goes on top. And our residential loads look like our commercial loads. That means we need more heat again in the winter, more electricity and cooling in the summer, and more heat in the winter again. So how do we supply this energy? Well, let's look at what the renewables are going to do for us. Of course, we'll still have some nuclear, we'll still have some hydro, we'll still have some biofuels in small amounts, but the majority of the energy supply in the future is going to be wind, is at a minimum in the winter, peaks in the middle seasons, in spring and in autumn, and of course solar peaks in the summer. So if we superimpose all of that solar, all of that wind, we can actually come to a new idea of why don't we design the whole system for that peak winter demand. And if we do that, we find that we only need to build 10 to 20% oversupply, 10 to 20% abundance to get there. That will be cheaper than batteries, that'll be cheaper than storage, and that will free energy for much of the year, will provide enormous numbers of new business opportunities and genuine abundance, not just for America, but for the whole world. We need to no longer think about just getting to 100% renewables, we need to think 120. Electrification is the antidote to inflation. It is the vaccine against climate change. Electrification is the abundance agenda. It's good climate policy. It's good economic policy. It's good for our communities and it's good for our health. Thank you.
Financial investments shape the world we live in. Some for better, some for worse. Which are yours? Traditional analysis with its primary focus on risk and return isn't able to say. Until now, we've never had an easy way to see between the lines, to measure the total impact of your portfolio. But now we do. It's a tool that joins data and technology called Morgan Stanley IQ. Whether it's broad themes like human rights, gender equality, or climate change you care about, or something more specific, like enabling access to data and information, Morgan Stanley IQ shows you exactly how well your investments line up. It exposes where your portfolio is tied to activities you'd rather avoid, and reveals where it supports the things you care about most. Then together with your Morgan Stanley financial advisor, it can help change your portfolio, which just might help change the world too.
Commercial case for ESG has outpaced the investment case. And as a result, this term ESG has become increasingly bombastic because of environmental, social, and governance factors. I mean, one of these days, will just be called investing, I think.
And I think we are seeing really a collision of really important forces right now that are creating a almost reimagined capitalism for a warming planet.
But as Joel alluded to, this moment that we are living and working through in sustainable finance and investing is a pretty profound one.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sidebar here at Greenbiz 23. Leah and I are super excited to be joined by Greenbiz.org's new Emerging Leaders Program Manager, Brian Lewis. Brian, welcome to Sidebar.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
You have had a very prominent role at this, your first Greenbiz as a Greenbiz employee. How's it been for you so far?
Oh, man, it's been great. I love this organization. I love everything that we're doing, and especially our Emerging Leaders program. I'm an emerging leader myself, and to see that kind of come full circle has been a blessing, to say the least.
It's very cool.
So you just said that you were an emerging leader yourself. Can you kind of walk us through how you got connected to Greenbiz as an emerging leader, how you came back now to be working amongst us, to be the best of colleagues? Just walk us through it all.
Yeah. I actually don't even remember how I got in contact with Greenbiz, but it was an application, and I just sent it in on a whim. And then a couple weeks later, got a notification that they were flying me out to Scottsdale, Arizona for this Greenbiz conference. And so I had an opportunity to get in contact with all of my fellow cohort, and we had an amazing time at the conference. Just getting to know, obviously, my cohort and then the Greenbiz community, and I've been able to stay in touch with them over the 3 years that it's been since that moment.
Wow.
And from the top down, it's been really impressive just how integrated the philosophy of expanding opportunity for people of color is throughout this organization. Pete May, Joel Macauer, founders of the organization, got a chance to meet them and stayed in contact with them. And as Greenbiz.org was forming, I made sure that my name was on the list. And so I'm very blessed to be here in this role. And it's kind of coming full circle now, kind of being able to now give back to this community in a very integral way.
Very cool. And you're located in Detroit. You're a Detroit man.
I am the Detroit man, a Detroit advocate. I will always uplift my city. And if anybody wants to come through, I'll definitely show you around.
It is a great city. I have always enjoyed going there. Tell us a little bit more about the Emerging Leaders Program. Maybe people are watching that might want to be involved, or maybe a little bit about the actual cohort this year. What kind of people we've got in that group, and what we're excited about with that program.
Yeah, well, each of our cohorts for the Emerging Leaders Program are exceptional, and this year is no exception. Our Emerging Leaders Program is a program where we organize a group of 10 emerging BIPOC sustainability professionals aged 21 to 29. So you can be in college, you can be doing your master's, and you can be also an early career professional. But as long as you're working towards emerging leadership in sustainability, we want to get to know you and get in contact with you. And what we do is we give you full access to the conference. We pay your airfare, your lodging. We put you in a really nice hotel. That hotel.
That's
really,
enough.
really
That's
nice.
enough.
Oh man! But we also connect you with our Greenbiz community. We directly link you to our Greenbiz executive network and loop you into different opportunities for professional development and mentorship in an ongoing manner. So this is not just a one-stop shop. Obviously, this is a great event, but we keep you engaged in our network as we're continuing to expand it out. And we're looking forward to being able to build out a place-based network of emerging BIPOC superstars that are actively engaged in changing the world in which we live.
Very cool.
And so you work at greenbiz.org. John and I work at greenbiz.com.
Yes.
For the viewers who didn't know that there was a difference, could you help explain to them what is the difference besides one is org and one is com?
Yeah. Well, that is the main difference.
Yeah.
But specifically, Greenbiz Group is committed to expanding opportunities for people of color in a multitude of different ways, not just through our Emerging Leaders Program. And especially in 2020, when it became very apparent that there was a categoric shift that needed to be made in our sustainability industry. It was important for Greenbiz to now start or to support or sponsor a nonprofit that had a mission towards uplifting underserved voices of color and expanding opportunities for, again, our underserved communities. And the difference between Greenbiz Group and Greenbiz.org is that Greenbiz.org is, one, very new. We just started a couple of years ago, and I am our first program manager. And we are committed to building out from our Emerging Leaders Program a network of really well-integrated, highly resourced, sustainable professionals of color, such that we can start to make an impact in communities across this country and even beyond.
So we have emerging leaders at all of our events. We've had him in the past. Big shout out to Cecily on our team who used to shepherd this program. Did an excellent job in the past, just bringing these people in and making them feel welcome. Tell us a little bit more about how to apply, what's coming up for the emerging leaders, basically how to connect.
That's a great question, because our Emerging Leaders application for circularity just opened up.
Yes, it did.
And we're excited to welcome any and all applicants. What this will be is there's an application. You can fill it out. It'll take about 20 minutes. It'll be on the Circularity 23 events page. You can navigate into the subpage, and there'll be an Emerging Leaders page that'll give you a download as to the program benefits and some of the amazing integrations that we're making for our emerging leaders. Fill out the application, and within the next couple of months, we're definitely going to be selecting our 10 emerging leaders for that cohort. For circularity, obviously there's different subject matters for each one of our events, and so we're looking for rock stars who are passionate about the circular economy and people who are really interested in expanding their network, but also expanding their interests and passions and letting that develop.
Yeah, I know I met I met most of the emerging leaders last year at Circularity, and just an amazing group of people. And it's been cool to follow what they've done since last year. So
for sure.
Excited about this next cohort as well.
Yeah. And our emerging leaders continue to stay engaged. And so we have many emerging leaders who are at this conference as speakers, as presenters, and we look forward to continuing to see that integration grow over time.
Yeah, awesome. Being that this was your first Greenbiz as an employee, what have you taken away so far? What's the experience been like?
I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is just how much work goes into making this happen. Like people like Julia Van, obviously both of you, our amazing team backstage, the tech crew. It's amazing to see how it all kind of comes together backstage. And so for me, this has been an amazing kind of insight into the world of sustainability, but then also the resources you need to be able to make it happen.
Yeah.
Yep. And it really is a group effort. Thank you so much, Brian. It was a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
We'll see you soon.
We'll be back.
For sure.
We're in a critical decade for the climate, and forests are a powerful natural solution for removing carbon from the atmosphere. In partnership with Microsoft AI for Earth, NCX's forest data scientists developed the first high-resolution forest map of every acre of America. NCX uses this data to ensure your carbon payments drive real, immediate, scalable, and efficient climate impact with landowners in your state and your supply chain. Now, every landowner and every acre of forest can be part of the climate solution.
Welcome back to the Greenbiz 23 Sidebar. We are joined by Brian Lawrence, Business Development Director for Circular Economy at Henkel. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks, guys.
We are so excited to have you here. So to get us started, why don't you tell us a little bit about your company? What is Henkel?
Great. Thanks, John and Leah, for allowing me to come out here today and talk a little bit about Henkel. But before we get started, I get this a lot. We're not a nice company, okay? Hopefully by the end of the day, you'll understand we're a little bit more than that, and you'll realize that you probably touch our products multiple times throughout the day. But
that was literally the first thing my wife said when I was introducing somebody from Henkel.
That's funny. So let's go with a little bit of the history. So Henkel is a large multinational company. We're family-owned. Our headquarters is in Dusseldorf, Germany. We were founded in 1876, almost 150 years old.
Wow.
We have, our sales are roughly 20 billion euro. As you want to translate, that'll change in dollars. But, we also have roughly 50,000 employees globally. And, global headquarters are in regional headquarters across the globe. So, I think, real quick, we have two primary business units. One is our consumer brands group, which I'll tell you some of those in a minute. And then the other is, we're an adhesives technology company. We're actually the largest adhesives manufacturer in the world. So let's, since we're primarily a German company and our brands aren't necessarily known very well in North America, our consumer products are based in two segments within the consumer products group, which is laundry and beauty. So on the laundry side, you'll see, actually Persil is the brand that we launched 5 years ago into North America. It had a few Super Bowl commercials to try to bring that over. So being, just after the Super Bowl here, Persil, Purex, All, Sun, and Snuggle will all fall in those areas.
Snuggle.
And then in the beauty side, we're Dial Soap. They used to be based here. We purchased them out of Scottsdale. They used to have their headquarters here. So that's, soaps, body washes, and so forth. And then we also have, personal hair care for the home, like Got2b hairstyles, styling gels and sprays and all that kind of stuff. And we also have a professional line of products that we sell to the spas, like and it's hair colorants. It's Schwarzkopf is the name of it. So those are our brands. And it's about 50% of our 20 billion euro is in that side. The other half is adhesives technologies. And one, we do have a brand in adhesive technology called Loctite. So if you go to Home Depot, Lowe's in the glue aisle, that's where you'll find it. But the other part of it is all industrial, all B2B. And we're in some pretty major segments like automotive, building and construction, electronics, and where I reside, which is packaging adhesives, industrial packaging. So when you come home, as I say, touch every day. I mean, if you're driving in your car, you're waking up in your house, coming out of the house, putting on your PDA or your phone, and everything in your cupboard and your refrigerator is all packaging adhesives. Everything in the grocery store has an adhesive on it. So multiple times during the day, people touch Henkel if they don't even know it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I worked at two building product companies before I joined Greenbiz, and we were Henkel customers in those places as well. So, Brian, I think we're over 1,900 sustainability leaders here in Scottsdale this week. What kind of conversations have you been having? What does Henkel hope to take away from this experience in Scottsdale?
Well, this is great. So, been coming here for 3 years straight, with the COVID year in between, right? So it's been terrific as far as really making those collaborations, those connections with like-minded, suppliers. And, we have two people from our consumer products group here, two people from our industrial adhesives packaging side here, and we each have different goals in what we're looking for, but we're finding, industry collaborators either, in some of the retailers, consumers, obviously everybody's a consumer, but, retailers, producers, everybody's here, allied suppliers, trying to make connections and, working on those like-minded goals to change some of the industry areas.
Yeah. That's, it's interesting how many connections can be made at a conference like this, and it's exciting to hear that's one of the things you're taking away. In the last few seconds, what are you looking towards in 2023? How do you get it done at Henkel?
Yeah, so obviously it's crazy. So the sustainability area, the Greenbiz area, is a major focus within Henkel, right? So just real quick before we go, if people are multitasking, go to our website. We produce a yearly sustainability audit that people can look into for more detail on where we are that way. But as far as here, it's about making the connections, finding out what we need to do and what our customers need to do to hit their 2025, 2030 goals and helping them do that.
Awesome. Brian, thanks for joining us on Sidebar. Have a good rest of Greenbiz 23.
John and Leah, thank you very much for having me.
We'll be right back.
Whatever you're making, we'll help you make it more sustainably so you can make it for life.
At Southwest Gas, we believe that when we're open to all possibilities, we can build a sustainable energy future. We provide energy to bring comfort to your home, fuel community growth, and support climate goals through innovation. We're imagining energy differently.
All right, and we are back with Max Dubison, Vice President of Sustainability Policy and Engagement at Indigo Ag. Welcome, Max.
Thanks. Good to be here.
So first, how can Indigo Ag help scale up a carbon project? And let's preface that. Please explain what Indigo Ag is and what you do.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of folks might not be familiar with Indigo Ag. We're a ag tech company based in Boston, started up in 2013. We have biological products, so soil microbe that we sell as seed coatings for growers. And then we also have digital products. So we have a grain contracting platform, and then we have our carbon program and sustainability offers that kind of connect those two as well in the supply chains. So we've been working in carbon since 2019 with the goal of how can we get farmers to do regenerative practices and get them paid based on the performance that they're doing at a large scale. How can we reach every farmer? So scaling it up is really about first establishing the policy frameworks that enable this, so working with the Climate Action Reserve and Vera to develop new protocols that are more broad in scope and more flexible and create this kind of results-based approach rather than a very narrow approach that a lot of protocols have taken in the past. And then that enabled us to bring in a project that includes a lot of different crops and a lot of different practices, and growers can stack their practices. And then the next thing is the scientific approach, a big statistical approach that lets us have this really big population and bring down the level of uncertainty by aggregating all the growers together. And then the last is operational. So having the digital infrastructure to handle all of this, having the partners that are out there helping us engage with the growers and bring them into the program, and on the back end, sort of processing all of that data in a way that's still verifiable.
Yeah. So on the Carbon by Indigo program, are you working then directly with the growers, and how do you do that outreach? How do you find those people to participate in the program?
Sure. We're working directly with growers, and we're working through partners to get to growers. So some growers come to our website and they open an account and they draw their field boundary and they start inputting their data directly. And in those cases, we do have a carbon customer success team that is building personal relationships. They're based all over the country, and I don't think any grower has gone through the whole data collection and credit generation process without speaking to a human, and in many cases meeting a human face-to-face. But then, as I said, we also have a lot of partnerships. Corteva is one of our biggest partnerships. They've already got relationships with the growers. They can work with the crop advisor that they're already working with and come into the Indigo program that way.
That's absolutely incredible. So could you tell us more about Indigo's Market Plus program?
Sure. So when I mentioned earlier that we have a grain contracting platform, that's what Market Plus is. And it's a digital platform that enables growers who want to sell their grain to access buyers who are trying to find grain to buy in ways that are often done manually right now. So this is replacing a lot of phone calls. You know, the grower on the phone 20 times a day with their co-op. What's the price of corn now? What's the price of corn now? And it enables transactions that maybe wouldn't happen otherwise. Buyers finding growers and growers finding buyers that maybe they didn't know were available.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I grew up on a farm, so I can only imagine how little they like being on the phone a lot, trying to find people to sell their grain to. So that's exciting. We've got about a minute left. What's next? What is Indigo Ag working on now? What does 2023 look like and beyond for your company?
Yeah, well, in the carbon program, it's a very exciting moment because we had our first issuance of credits last June. We issued just over 22,000 tons, and we've scaled up significantly. As I mentioned, in the aggregation, we're adding fields into the project every year. So our second issuance is coming later this month. It'll be more than twice as big as the first one because we've added significant quantity of acres. And we're already collecting data for the third issuance. So it's really demonstrating not only that it can be done, but that it's repeatable and scalable. Because it's the same project, we're using the same models, and we're putting in many more growers. Beyond that, we're also doing some exciting work exploring supply chain solutions. We've done several projects with different brands sourcing directly, either cotton or rice or corn, and helping them understand the practices that are happening on the field and how it's moving through the supply chain and the environmental impacts that reach their inventory.
Awesome.
That's incredible. And I've worked with farmers in the past, and I know that the overhead can be a burden. So just making that supply chain aspect much more efficient and more effective for the farmers, that's got to change their worlds.
Yeah. Absolutely, and we need it to be scalable.
Yeah.
Well, Max, thanks for joining us. Enjoy the rest of Greenbiz.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We'll be right back.
Forests are one of the most effective solutions that we have today. If we are to solve climate change, billions of dollars need to go to nature restoration. We're working to ensure that that investment will happen effectively with transparency and accountability.
Supply chain ESG reporting isn't a nice to have. It's a legal obligation. If you want to sell your goods and maintain market access, you have no choice. You have to get it right.
It's a lot of work, but the good news is that Ascent can do it for you. Investors really want companies to get ESG right, and so do customers.
Bottom line, the majority of what matters in ESG is in your supply chain. It's not just about spotting risks. It's about taking the right corrective actions to remove those risks for the future.
If you are thinking about establishing a sustainability agenda, the first stage is to set up your carbon accounting practice. This is why we started with Persephone as step one.
Persephone. There's more to zero.
That's right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sidebar at Greenbiz 23. We're joined now by Crystal Barnes, Senior Vice President of Social Responsibility and ESG at Paramount. Crystal, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So we just heard you on the main stage a while ago discussing the impact Paramount is making through its ESG work, and in particular your Content for Change initiative. The video was awesome. Super excited about this initiative. You know, beyond that initiative, though, how's Paramount's ESG strategy contributing to both develop and drive change in your industry?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, again, thank you for having me. So we look at ESG in three ways. We look at it on-screen content and social impact. So you heard a lot about that through Content for Change on stage, which is kind of how we show up, our workforce and culture, who we are, and then our sustainable production and operations, how we do what we do. And so a lot of the kind of other ESG work that we do is in the sustainable production space. We know that from, again, concept to actual production and stage building of the stages and in the film on our sound stages to the actual content that's made, there's a lot of opportunity there from an environmental sustainability perspective. And so we, along with a lot of media companies, are trying to figure out how we really wrap our arms around the sustainable production of it all and what that looks like.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So as Paramount is working to build their global sustainability strategy, how are you taking care of the immediate environmental impacts of your business, that you just referred to, particularly related to sustainable production?
Yeah, so it feels silly, but we're looking at things like, how do we recycle our sets? And what does that look like? How do we ensure that stuff doesn't go to landfill, and how we control the waste and how we put metrics around it? And so we're members of the Sustainable Production Alliance, so we know that we're not in this alone, right? It's a bunch of Hollywood studios who are trying to figure out the whole sustainability space and the sustainable production space. We have green guidelines that we use that we have had for years at Paramount Pictures in the film piece of our business. But then what does it look like to bring that to Nickelodeon and MTV and BET and Comedy Central, and I can go on and on. But then also with the Sustainable Production Alliance, they also have their own set of green guidelines. And so we've adopted that as well. And again, this pilot to scale model, how do we take that across our entire organization? So we haven't totally figured it out, but it's a journey. And it's something that we know, again, that we're not alone and that we're really trying to be aggressive in how we look at it, because it truly is the most material opportunity for us as a media and entertainment company.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear that you're working on all this, because my daughters love some of the Paramount Plus programming. So we are subscribers at our house.
Thank you for your service.
So So we learned on the main stage that used to be at Nielsen.
Yes.
So how did you find your way to Paramount and into this role leading ESG?
You know what? So as I said on stage, I'm a media and research head. Like I love it, and I think that it underpins every ESG and sustainability strategy, quite frankly. Like you can't measure your progress if you don't have the data and analytics to support it. And so one of the things that I love about Paramount is, again, we are a brand of brands. We have all these amazing brands that everyone loves. But there's amazing opportunity in the media and entertainment space around sustainability. It's fairly new. We're not a CPG company. And so we have the opportunity to define what ESG and sustainability means for media and entertainment. So it was exciting for me to take my data and research and analysis background and to apply it to an industry that was kind of in their freshman year of sustainability and figure out what it means for us as a company.
And what progression have you been able to see just over that time?
Yeah, so much. The good thing is people are into it and they are willing to figure out what it means to be transparent in this space for media and entertainment. We have, again, it's a coalition building exercise for us as an industry. It's not competitive in that way. All ships rise. I said this on stage, but it really is that kind of mentality around sustainability and ESG. So I've seen progress in that we're becoming more transparent about our processes, that people feel bought into the journey that we're on as a company. It doesn't matter kind of what role you sit at within the organization. You know that you have a bit of ownership around the sustainability work that we're doing. So I think it's been phenomenal. And, as more and more pressure and legislation comes down the pike, we're ready, right? And so it's great to be in a position where we're forward thinking. We're thinking about how sustainability shows up in our content itself, how we talk about it on screen. So it's evolving. We're thinking about the impacts of streaming, things that you really didn't think about, 10, 15 years ago. And now, to your point around being a subscriber, sustainability is at the forefront of all of those conversations in the next iterations of our company and of our industry.
Awesome. Well, Crystal, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being on our keynote stage here at Greenbiz 23. And hopefully we'll talk again soon.
I'd love it. Thanks for having me.
All right. And that is it for us right now. We'll be back in a couple minutes.
Reaching net zero is a coordinated and collaborative global effort of unprecedented scale. It is a journey the world takes together. At Microsoft, we announced 4 bold new commitments in 2020. Building on these commitments, we're grounding our work in 3 focus areas. We are advancing the sustainability of our business, and as we learn from our progress, we innovate and share with others. Creating sustainability solutions for operational efficiency and environmental impact while enabling and tracking carbon reduction. The climate can't be saved by one country or one company, so we're supporting the societal infrastructure of a sustainable world, making significant investments in research, development, and partnerships to drive climate innovation forward. Net zero is ambitious, but working together, it is achievable.
Sometimes it's just asking the right question. What kind of impact you want to make?
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to our sidebar. We are just about ready to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Leah, it's been incredibly fun sitting in the sidebar with you for the last couple of days. So thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm glad to be fun.
And thank you all for joining us virtually these last 2 days here at Greenbiz 23. We hope you learned as much as we did from the content. If there's something we can improve, we'd love to hear it. Reach out to us either by email or at Greenbiz on Twitter or on LinkedIn. We're on all the things. Leah, you're on TikTok.
Yes.
For Greenbiz.
Greenbiz is on TikTok, and while it's mostly just my face attempting to understand how TikTok works and talking about what I write about, we're there. It's a presence.
We are there. Is there I don't know a lot about TikTok. I think I might have said yesterday I had to delete my account because I was watching too many videos.
Yeah.
Can people interact with you on TikTok?
They can message me
all
for
right.
sure. So it's at Greenbiz. You'll find us. The GB in blue is there, and we're trying to grow the account, and we want to reach and impact as many people as possible because, you know, if there's one thing we can take away from this entire experience, it's that community and working together is really what's going to solve this climate crisis. So please reach out, interact. I always want to know what's happening, what new startups there are, what new initiatives. Let us know. We're here.
Yeah, so when you're done watching all those dance videos and clay pot making, head over to the Greenbiz page. So we have 3 more in-person events coming up this year, as well as, I believe, 3 virtual events.
Yes.
And we'll have Sidebar at all of our in-person events, Circularity in June, Greenfin in June, and, of course, Verge in October. So please join us again for those. If you can't join in person, we'd love to have you back joining us on the live stream. I think that just about does it for us.
It does. I'm sad.
Yeah, I'm a little sad too.
I'm going to miss you all.
We'll talk soon. Don't be strangers. Have a great Wednesday. It's Wednesday, right? Yes. Have a great Wednesday. Thank you again. And we are out.
We are out, but we don't want to be.